My name is Grayson Wells, and I fix things. Roofs, gutters, cracked siding, the kind of stuff most people don't notice until water's seeping into the living room or the wind's whistling through a hole in the attic. I own Wells Exterior, a small but reliable home repair company in Charleston. Nothing fancy. No corporate banners or shiny commercials. Just a beat-up Ford with my logo on the side, a crew of 6 good men and women, and a reputation that lets me sleep at night. What most people don't realize is that this dirty job paid for more than just the shingles on my clients' houses. It paid for the bricks of the home Camille and I live in. It funded her culinary degree, the one she chased with fire in her eyes and calluses on her fingers. It bankrolled her skincare business, Camille's Skin Studio, the one with eucalyptus-scented candles and cream-colored walls. My work, the sweat under my fingernails and the grit in my boots, made that all possible. So, call me naive, but I thought on my birthday, I'd be met with something. A little warmth. A nod of recognition. Hell, even a slice of store-bought cake would have done. Instead, when I asked Camille if the family was coming over for the small dinner I'd planned, nothing wild, just pot roast and my mom's apple pie, she didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. She just rolled them. Your brother Jared is hosting a barbecue that day, she said, like I hadn't already heard. And let's be real, your birthdays are always a bit dramatic. My sister-in-law Lila, who was lounging on our couch like it was her own, laughed loud enough to make sure I heard. Oh yeah, remember last year? The grill caught fire. That was wild. I forced a smile. That was because Jared forgot to take the plastic off the brisket. Camille shrugged. Still counts. I turned to my mom, who was fiddling with her rings at the kitchen island. So, you coming? She winced, the way she always does when guilt creeps in. We'll drop by after the barbecue if there's time. You know how Jared gets when he plans these things. Wants the whole family there. My wife smirked as she sipped from her herbal tea. A birthday for a guy who fixes gutters? Please. She didn't even mean it as a joke. That was just Camille now, sharp, polished, half sighing through life like everything was beneath her. I stared at her for a moment, wondering how we got here. Once upon a time, she used to meet me at the door with kisses and news of her latest recipe. Now, she barely noticed when I came home. I nodded slowly, let it settle. Then I said it, soft but certain, cool. Don't say I didn't warn you. She blinked like she hadn't heard me right, but I didn't repeat myself. I walked outside, the evening air thick with Charleston humidity, and leaned against the truck that had carried ladders, tools, and my dreams across the Lowcountry for years. I wasn't hurt, not in the way they probably thought I should be. No, I'd stopped expecting applause a long time ago. But that didn't mean I didn't notice the silence. Didn't mean it didn't matter. There's a difference between needing recognition and deserving it. And that night, as I looked out over my neighborhood, the fences I'd repaired, the windows I'd sealed, the homes I'd protected from hurricanes and neglect, I knew something was shifting inside me. They all thought I was just the gutter guy, a man with a toolkit and calloused hands. But they didn't know the plans I had, the calls I'd made, the foundation I was about to lay, not just under a roof, but under an idea, a movement. My birthday wasn't going to be about cake or pity or last-minute guests. It was going to be about legacy. Let them laugh. Let them eat ribs and pose for pictures at Jared's place. Because when the lights came on and the curtains lifted, they'd finally see me, not the man in dirty boots, but the builder behind something far bigger than any of them imagined. And when they did, they'd remember this birthday for the rest of their lives. As a kid, I used to stare out my bedroom window and imagine the crowd. Not a stadium crowd, no. I wasn't a ball player or a singer. Just a group of people who saw me. Who really saw me. Teachers would pass over me in school, family would gloss over the small victories, and somehow, I got used to clapping for myself in silence. That's probably why I started building. You can't ignore a roof once it's finished. You can't deny a leak that's been sealed. Physical proof, that's what I learned to rely on. Not applause. And still, deep down, that old ache stuck around. Every time Jared got praised for changing marketing jobs, again, or my mom gushed about how Lila managed the PDA bake sale like it was a Fortune 500 project, I'd feel it. The invisibility. No one asked how I built Wells Exterior from nothing. Not even Camille. To her, I was just handy around the house. I heard her say that once, giggling with a friend in our kitchen. Grayson's great for DIY stuff, she said. Like I was some YouTube handyman who dabbled in repairs on the weekends, not someone who ran a 6-figure business with 3 trucks and a book of clients that stretched from Mount Pleasant to Goose Creek. But this time, this year, I was doing something different. A few months ago, I got a call from a man named Royce, Edmund Royce, to be exact. Old money, Charleston royalty, the kind of man who wore loafers with no socks and didn't own a single social media account. He'd seen my work after one of his properties got thrashed in a storm. I rebuilt the back patio, reinforced the siding, and helped his groundskeeper secure a temporary shelter. No fanfare. Just work. Good work. And that apparently meant something to him. "I like your ethic," he'd said, swirling a glass of something aged and golden. "You build. You don't talk much. I respect that. Ever think about teaching it?" I paused. "Teaching it?" He leaned forward, that old money gleam in his eye. "This city's full of kids with nothing to do and no one willing to train them. You've got something they can use. We fund a nonprofit. You run it." I should have said no. I had enough on my plate: clients, payroll, managing Camille's growing resentment every time I got home late smelling like shingles and sealant. But instead, I said yes. Quietly, without announcing it on Facebook or sending out a family group text. I started planning. The nonprofit would be called Trade Future Foundation. We'd take teens fresh out of high school, or hell, even ones who never made it to graduation, and teach them real trade skills. Roofing, siding, basic carpentry, electrical prep. And not just technical stuff. We'd build character. Give them structure. Direction. I didn't tell Camille. Not at first. Every time I started to, she'd be mid-rant about her inventory delays or how someone copied her branding. And when she wasn't ranting, she was checked out, staring at her phone, scrolling, nodding absently like I was background noise. So I stopped trying. I figured she'd find out soon enough. The official launch was set for my birthday. The same day Jared was hosting his infamous backyard barbecue, complete with beer pong and a smoked brisket that everyone pretended to like more than they actually did. It was almost poetic. One brother hosting a meat-fueled carnival, the other unveiling something that could change lives. And nobody knew which mattered more. Not yet. I secured the Foundry Hall, worked with Royce's team to set up media coverage, pulled in a few city council members who owed me favors from past repair jobs, and invited clients I'd helped over the years. Especially the ones who'd suffered during hurricane season and had nowhere to turn until I showed up with my crew and a ladder. Every night after work, I planned. Not just the event, but the future. I built training modules. I sourced affordable tools. I worked with a designer on a logo. I even made room in my schedule to mentor our first batch of students myself. And I told no one. Let them think I was sitting in my workshop sulking about missed birthday calls. Let them mock the guy who just fixes gutters. That silence? It was fuel. Every eye roll, every condescending chuckle, it only added weight to the foundation I was laying. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. I didn't want to humiliate them. I just wanted to show them what they'd never bothered to look at. Because this time, when I built something real, something lasting, it wouldn't be for Camille, or Jared, or even my mother's late-to-the-party validation. It would be for me. And this time, it wouldn't be ignored. The thing about people underestimating you is, they get comfortable doing it. It becomes muscle memory, an automatic reflex. You speak, they smirk. You plan, they dismiss. You try, and they remind you, gently or not, that your reach is only as long as your hammer handle. That week leading up to my birthday, Camille didn't just ignore my dinner plans, she actively lobbied against them like she was trying to tank a city council vote. "I'm going to Jared's," she said casually one night as she exfoliated her face in the bathroom mirror. "Everyone's going to be there. Why should I miss the fun for meatloaf and paper plates?" I didn't even look up from where I was scrubbing my boots. "I thought we said we'd keep it low-key this year." She scoffed. "Low-key doesn't have to mean sad, Grayson." That one stuck with me. Sad. Like spending an evening with your husband who paid for your dreams and built your life brick by brick was a burden. An embarrassment. Something to be pitted. 2 days before my birthday, I got a selfie from Jared. He was standing in front of a brand new grill, the kind that had Bluetooth thermometers and 7 heat zones, like he was about to grill steaks for the queen. "Sorry, man," the caption read. "Next year. Next year." Like I had birthdays to spare. Even my dad texted a day early. No call, just a bland message that read, "Happy early birthday. You know your brother's events bring the whole crew together." Yeah, I knew. I nodded at every excuse. Played the fool. Smiled at Camille when she brushed off my invitations. Told her it was fine when she asked if she should bring a bottle of wine to Jared's. She didn't know I'd already dropped a non-refundable deposit on the Foundry. Didn't know I was meeting with city officials on my lunch breaks. Didn't know I was building something behind the curtain, And when that curtain lifted, there wouldn't be any turning away. Behind the scenes, I was coordinating with press outlets, some local, a few regional. One paper had a lifestyle editor who once interviewed me during hurricane season, after I'd rebuilt half a neighborhood in less than a month. She remembered, said she'd be there. I reached out to clients, people I'd worked for when their lives were falling apart. Families who'd watched their homes cave in and trusted me to put it back together. I didn't ask them to come for me. I asked them to come for what we were doing. For the kids we were going to train. For the neighborhoods we were going to strengthen. This wasn't just a party. This was a tribute. It was every hour I spent under a summer sun with sweat stinging my eyes. Every winter morning spent on a frozen roof. Every dollar I saved when I wanted to spend. Every time someone looked at me and only saw dirt on my jeans and not the empire I built with my hands. They didn't think I'd do anything special. I was just the guy who could fix the downspout, patch the shingles, haul a ladder. A reliable presence, never the main event. But I didn't need fireworks or confetti. I needed light. And I was about to step into it. Every detail of the launch was planned to reflect the people we were trying to uplift. The logo of Trade Future Foundation was shaped like a rising sun made of tools. The decorations at the foundry would include centerpieces made from reclaimed wood, toolboxes painted gold, and framed letters from our first apprentices. Our staff would wear name tags that didn't list titles, just first names and what they used to be before the trade turned their lives around. Ex-janitor, now electrician. Former dropout, now crew chief. Truth in ink. I kept working my day job like nothing had changed. During the day, I was still Grayson, the guy patching a roof in West Ashley or replacing siding in North Charleston. But at night, I was sculpting something bigger. They all thought I was sulking about a missed party. Let them. Camille kept flashing her RSVP to Jared's barbecue like it was a backstage pass to Coachella. She even tried on 3 different sundresses the night before, asking me which one felt more fun. I said, whichever one makes it easier for you to pretend I'm not doing anything worth showing up for. She paused, but only for a second. Don't be dramatic, Grayson. It's just a barbecue. Just a barbecue. Just a gutter guy. Just a meatloaf dinner on a paper plate. Cool. Let them laugh. I had other plans. The night had finally arrived. I stood just outside the foundry hall, straightening the cuffs of my jacket, the one Camille had never seen. Royal blue with subtle checkered stitching, fitted like I belonged in it, like I'd planned this moment with the same precision I brought to every rooftop project. My boots were polished, but still workman's leather. I wanted them to remember who I was, who I'd always been. The foundry stood tall in the heart of downtown Charleston, all brick and restored steel. No neon signs. No grand banners. Just soft golden lights lining the stone steps and velvet ropes swaying in the breeze. The venue usually hosted high-end art shows, elite weddings, and black tie galas. Tonight, it hosted a different kind of celebration, a foundation born not from money, but from sweat, from calloused hands, from grit that didn't wash off. Inside, it was everything I'd envisioned. My staff had transformed the space into a tribute to the trades. Reclaimed with tables held centerpieces made from old copper piping bent into elegant shapes, each filled with wildflowers. Toolboxes, worn, dented, and dusted clean, served as decoration and symbol. Lanterns dangled from the rafters, casting soft light over plaques with words like resilience, craft, and legacy. My apprentices, kids I'd mentored, kids who once thought they had no future beyond minimum wage or jail time, were dressed to the nines. One wore a dark green suit with a patch on the inside that read, "First one in the family to wear a tie." Another, a young woman with braids pulled into a crown, greeted guests like a seasoned hostess. She'd helped rebuild 3 houses last year after the storm. That night, she was the queen of the room. I moved through the space, shaking hands with familiar faces. Clients whose homes I'd saved from rot and ruin. City council members who'd once ignored my emails but now smiled wide. Local business leaders. A chef I recognized from Camille's world, apparently curious about our training kitchen initiative. But at 7 p.m., I glanced toward the front table. Empty. 6 seats, neatly arranged. 1 for Camille, 1 each for my parents, Jared and Lila. And the 6th? I left that for dignity. For whoever else decided I mattered enough to show up. I nodded at the absence. Expected it, really. The venue buzzed with energy. A string quartet played a smooth jazz rendition of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Glasses clinked. Laughter bloomed like firecrackers. And yet, part of me kept checking the clock. Not out of hope, but out of habit. You spend enough of your life waiting for people to see you, it becomes muscle memory. The foundation launch was scheduled for 7:30. Press would be arriving at 7:15. I had 15 minutes left of quiet, of stillness before the cameras rolled and the lights dimmed. I walked over to the bar and poured myself a small glass of bourbon. Neat. No ice. Just warmth. The kind of drink that reminded you of what you'd survived. As I sipped, a woman tapped my shoulder. Councilwoman Davis. She leaned in with a knowing smile. I had no idea you were planning something this powerful, Grayson. Most people didn't, I said. Well, it's not just a foundation. It's a movement. I nodded, thankful, but the words rolled over me like water on wax. I didn't build this for recognition. I built it because I couldn't bear to watch more kids be told they weren't good enough just because they didn't want a desk job. Because I remembered what it felt like to be overlooked in your own house. I walked the perimeter of the room, touching the wood grain of tables, checking the name tags one last time, making sure my apprentices felt proud, secure, grounded. They did. I could see it in the way they stood taller, laughed freer, looked people in the eye like they belonged. But the front table stayed empty. At 7:10, the photographer walked in, gear slung across his shoulder. At 7:12, the mayor's assistant arrived with a folder full of endorsements. At 7:14, I heard the click-click-click of high heels on stone. I didn't turn around. Not yet. Because as much as I wanted my family to be there, especially Camille, I realized something standing in that glowing, repurposed steel cathedral. I wasn't empty. The seats were. But I wasn't. I was full. Of fire. Of peace. Of purpose. Because while they grilled hot dogs and clinked solo cups in Jared's backyard, I built something real. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to clap for it. I was already standing in the applause. At 7:15 on the dot, I heard the commotion start at the entrance. First, it was the sound of hurried footsteps on the stone outside. Then came the unmistakable rhythm of confusion. Doors opening too fast, velvet ropes shuffled aside, voices raised in apology and curiosity. The photographers had arrived, right on schedule, lenses already lifted, flashes warming up. I adjusted my cuffs and stepped toward the stage as a fresh wave of guests trickled in, buzzing from the press release that had just gone live. Grayson Wells launches Trade Future Foundation, honoring the trades that built Charleston. It hit the local wire, then the regional. By the time I reached the base of the stage, I could see a ripple moving through the room, phones vibrating in pockets, glances exchanged, whispers passed like lit matches. And that's when I saw them. It said something about a foundation, she whispered. I still scanning. I thought it was just a little thing. And then came Jared, still in his barbecue shirt, smelling like charcoal and beer, sweat clinging to his temple. He looked around, wide-eyed, like he'd walked into the wrong audition. But Camille, she made the entrance. The double doors opened like a queue, and in walked my wife, heels clicking like a metronome, hips swaying with that polished confidence she wore like perfume. Her red dress was striking too formal for a backyard, just bold enough for a gala. Her makeup was flawless, lips crimson, eyes lined sharp. But the expression on her face? That was all confusion. She took 3 steps inside, then stopped. The music played softly behind her. Conversations hummed around her. But Camille? She stood frozen. What is this? She muttered. A photographer, young, eager, and assuming, stepped toward her, mistaking her poise for authority. Ma'am, are you with Mr. Wells' PR team? Could you tell us how long he's been planning this? Camille blinked, caught between disbelief and pride and something close to embarrassment. This is his event? The photographer nodded, already lifting his camera. Yes, ma'am. Can I get a photo of you with the founder? Camille didn't answer. She was still trying to catch up. I watched the entire scene from near the stage, standing behind a cluster of guests who were congratulating one another like they'd just attended a historic unveiling. None of them noticed the people just arriving were family. None of them knew that the woman in red had once laughed at the very idea of this night being anything more than dramatic. I walked over slowly, drink still in hand, and stood just behind Camille's left shoulder. Good turnout, I said. She jumped slightly, then turned to face me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just air. You look nice, I added. Wasn't sure red was for backyard barbecues. She blinked. Grayson, what is this? Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask, I said calmly. But it's your birthday. It is. I looked around at the room that pulsed with intention, faces lit with inspiration, stories stitched together by effort, not ego. And it's also the beginning of something bigger. My mom walked up, clutching her pearls like they were a lifeline. Grayson, honey, Why didn't you mention any of this? Because you already had plans, I said. Didn't want to interrupt. Lila tried to offer a compliment. This place is nice. Like, really fancy. I turned to Jared, who looked like he'd stepped out of a frat party. Barbecue go well? He shrugged. Yeah, man. But this is something else. Yeah, I said. It is. Camille still hadn't moved. She stared past me, taking in the suits, the media badges, the elegant tool-themed decor. Her eyes landed on the projection screen where my face appeared, me on rooftops, mentoring kids, shaking hands with city leaders. You planned this for months, she said. I did. And you didn't say a word. I met her gaze, steady. Would you have listened? She had no answer. And the silence that followed? That was my answer. The room dimmed as the spotlight swiveled toward the stage, and suddenly, the soft hum of conversation gave way to silence. People shifted in their chairs. Forks paused midair. All eyes turned to the front, to the large screen that flickered to life above the podium. I stood just off to the side, heart steady, hands calm. I had climbed roofs in lightning storms and torn off old siding with ice clinging to my gloves. I wasn't nervous. Not now. This was my kind of work. Practical, purposeful, visible. And I was finally standing in the frame of something no one else could take credit for. The video started. It opened with a drone shot of Charleston rooftops, some pristine, others battered, tarps flapping in the wind. Then it cut to me, standing on a ladder, drill in hand, kneeling beside a busted foundation, teaching a teenager how to measure siding. One by one, the moments I thought would always live in obscurity came to life under the glow of the spotlight. Camille was still near the back, frozen in place. My parents had taken their seats awkwardly near the buffet, too far to pretend they belonged in the front row. Jared stood behind them, scratching the back of his neck like he wanted to disappear. But the rest of the room? They were leaning in. And then came the testimonials. An elderly woman in a worn cardigan appeared on screen, smiling softly. After the storm, Grayson didn't just fix my roof. He helped me carry groceries, brought bottled water, didn't charge me a dime. A single mother, holding her toddler, looked straight into the camera. He rebuilt the back steps so my son could walk down safely. He said it wasn't a big deal, but it was to me. A young man, maybe 17, with paint-stained jeans and a nervous grin said, I was flunking out of school. Nobody thought I'd make it. Grayson gave me a chance on his crew. Now I'm teaching others. I saw Camille shift uncomfortably. I didn't look away. The screen faded to black. Applause rose slowly, then built like thunder rolling through old steel beams. I stepped forward, toward the mic, into the spotlight that felt warmer than any sunroof I'd ever stood beneath. I looked out at the crowd. Not just the investors or the politicians, but the builders. The kids in suits, the neighbors who'd once cried in my driveway, the ones who remembered me not for what I said, but for what I did. I took a breath and leaned into the mic. Some people said my birthday dinner wasn't worth attending, I began. A few people chuckled nervously. I let it hang there. Said it was embarrassing to throw a party for a guy who fixes gutters. A ripple of laughter rolled through the audience, not cruel, but surprised. Warm. Engaged. I nodded. But fixing things is what I do. I stepped to the edge of the stage, voice steady, heart wide open. I fix leaks. I patch walls. I rebuild what time and weather try to tear down. But tonight, I'm fixing something bigger. Not just roofs. Not just windows. I'm fixing futures. There was a stillness then. A reverence. I glanced at Camille. She was staring at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of the mic. Like I'd slipped through the cracks of her expectations and rebuilt myself while she wasn't looking. I started this business with one ladder, one truck, and a willingness to show up when others didn't. And tonight, I'm launching Trade Future Foundation, not to be celebrated, but to give back. Because young people deserve to know that working with your hands doesn't make you less. I looked down at my calloused palms. It makes you more. Applause erupted again, stronger this time. Some stood. Some whistled. Some just sat with tears quietly slipping down their cheeks. I ended with one last line. You don't have to wear a suit to build something that lasts. Sometimes, all it takes is showing up, ready to work. And with that, I stepped back. The music picked up again. The lights lifted. The spotlight dimmed, but I didn't feel any smaller. I didn't shrink back into the shadows. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to wait for someone else to introduce me, to validate me, to call me anything more than what I already was. Builder, founder, fixer, leader, Grayson Wells. And whether or not my family saw it then, the rest of the room, they saw it loud and clear. The moment I stepped down from the stage, the room erupted. Not into chaos, but into warmth. People stood. Not everyone, but enough. Their applause didn't feel hollow or polite. It felt earned. Real. Some clapped hard like they knew exactly what this moment cost. Others just nodded slowly, hands tucked respectfully at their sides, like they'd seen something they hadn't expected and were still catching their breath. I moved through the crowd in a kind of daze, not the kind that comes from confusion, but from clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit someone else's idea of who I was supposed to be. I didn't have to minimize my work or downplay my pride. This night had my name on it. Not just the invitation, but the spirit of it. My fingerprints were on every inch of this foundation, and now the world knew it. I shook hands, hugged a few shoulders. My investors came first, led by Mr. Royce in his signature tailored linen suit. He clapped me on the back like a proud uncle. "You've got something special here, Grayson," he said. "This isn't a foundation, it's a revolution. You lit the match tonight. Let it burn." "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with more emotion than I expected. "Thank you for trusting me." The mayor came next. He offered a photo, a handshake, and then whispered something about a grant proposal that he'd like to expedite. It all felt surreal, but also deserved. Still, as the glow of the public moment began to fade, I saw them. By the buffet table, just outside the center of the crowd, stood the people I had once assumed would be at the front of the room. My family. Camille was the first to move. Her heels clicked slowly against the concrete floor, her face softer now, mascara slightly smudged at the edges. She stopped just short of me, like there was a wall between us she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross. "Grayson," she said, voice quiet, breath trembling. "I didn't know." I tilted my head. "No," I said gently. "You didn't want to know." She swallowed hard. "I thought you were just throwing together a dinner." I said, "but I was also building something. Something important." She looked around the room, taking in the lingering guests, the banners, the glowing faces of young men and women whose futures had just cracked open. I don't have words." "You don't need words," I replied. "You just needed to show up." Before she could respond, my mother stepped in, arms already stretching toward me. She hugged me tightly, tighter than I expected, and whispered in my ear. "I'm sorry, baby," she said. "I didn't know this meant so much to you." I let her hold me for a moment, then pulled back. It's meant everything to me. For years. My father came next, hands in his pockets, mouth pulled in that uneasy smirk he wore when emotions got too close. "You got us," he said, half laughing. "Didn't think you were planning all this." "That's kind of the problem, Dad," I said. "You didn't think." He nodded. "You're right." Then Jared stepped forward, barbecue sauce still faint on his collar, sweat long since dried. He looked embarrassed, like a kid caught skipping class. "Bro," he started. "I thought you were just doing some plumbing stuff. Minor repairs. Didn't know you were building a whole movement." I met his gaze evenly. "I've always been more than what you think I am, Jared. Always." He nodded, eyes down. "Yeah, I see that now." Behind them, Lila hovered like a bystander, wringing her hands. "It's beautiful, Grayson. Really? I didn't know you had it in you." "That's funny," I said, not unkindly, because I never stopped having it in me. Camille reached for my hand then. Her fingers brushed mine, light and hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she had the right anymore. "I was wrong," she whispered. "About a lot." I looked at her. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. "Yeah," I said. "You were." I didn't take her hand. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to understand this wasn't about optics or forgiveness under pretty lights. It was about something deeper. Respect. And respect doesn't start when the cameras are rolling. It starts in the quiet, in the everyday, in the moments when no one's watching, but someone still chooses to believe in you. They hadn't, but the people in this room had. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough for now. The morning after the launch, I woke up to the smell of bacon. That stopped me cold. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Camille hadn't cooked breakfast in years. Not since the early days, back when she still laughed at my jokes and pulled me into the kitchen to taste whatever recipe she was experimenting with. Lately, it had been smoothies on the go and complaints about the smell of grease. But there it was, bacon. And something sweeter, maybe cinnamon? I came downstairs slowly, cautious, like the house might snap out of the illusion if I moved too fast. Camille was in the kitchen, hair pulled up in a soft bun, wearing one of my oversized t-shirts. There were eggs on the stove, pancakes stacked on a plate, fresh fruit in a bowl. I blinked, unsure what part of me felt more disoriented, the smell of the food or the look of hesitation on her face when she turned and saw me. "Morning," she said, voice careful. I nodded. "Morning." We stood there for a moment. No rush to fill the space with meaningless chatter. She set 2 plates on the table. We sat across from each other, a silent treaty resting between the syrup and the steam. "I've been unfair," she said finally. Her fork barely touched the food. "Last night, I saw you in a way I should have seen you all along." I kept my hands still. Let her talk. "I married you for your kindness, your drive. I knew you were a builder, Grayson, not just of homes, but of people. I used to be proud of that. But somewhere along the way, I started chasing this idea of more. Fancier. Flashier. I started thinking that your quiet strength wasn't enough." She looked up at me then, eyes wet, but clear. "And I forgot that the most valuable things don't make noise." I didn't say anything yet. I didn't have to. She wasn't done. "I shouldn't have skipped your dinner. I shouldn't have rolled my eyes when you talked about plans. You've always supported me, paid for my dreams. Listen when no one else did. And when it was your turn to shine, I chose barbecue." She choked on a laugh then, bitter and broken. God, what kind of wife does that? I exhaled, slow and steady. My appetite hadn't arrived with the bacon. My stomach was still too full of everything left unsaid. I met her eyes. "You threw me away for a backyard party." "I know. I didn't ask for much," I said. "Just a few hours. A little space in your life where I didn't have to perform or beg for interest." Camille nodded, hands trembling around her coffee mug. "I was trying to prove something last night," I continued. "Not to strangers, not to investors, but to the people who always told me, without words, that I was just the guy with the ladder. I built something real, something lasting. And not a single one of you saw it until the lights were flashing and the applause was loud enough to drown out your assumptions." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Do you want me to leave?" The question sat there between us. Heavy. Loaded. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was the woman I married, still strong, still sharp, but cracked now. Exposed. And I didn't feel satisfaction in that. I didn't want her broken. I wanted her awake. "I want respect," I said. "Real respect. Not the kind that shows up when a reporter calls. Not the kind that's dressed in a red dress just because you realize I'm worth standing beside again. I want the kind of respect you give someone when no one else is watching." She nodded slowly. "And if I can't give you that?" I didn't hesitate. "Then you already left." The silence afterward was different. Not cold, but honest. Like we'd finally cut the rod out from under the beams and could see whether the structure was worth salvaging. She stood up quietly, wiped her cheeks, and started clearing plates. I didn't stop her. When she passed by me, she rested her hand on my shoulder. Just briefly, but it lingered with the weight of everything we didn't say. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the steam still curling from the untouched pancakes, and realized something. Respect isn't owed just because you share a roof or a bed. It's earned daily in the details and the silences where someone chooses to stand beside you or walk away. And for the first time in a long time, I was done making space for anyone who chose the door. The house was quiet now. Not in a peaceful way, but in that hollow kind of quiet you notice when someone's missing. Camille had moved out 2 weeks after the foundation launch, said she needed space to think. I didn't argue. She packed her things with a kind of sad reverence, like she'd suddenly realized she'd been walking through a museum of memories and hadn't looked closely at any of the exhibits. She left a note on the counter. "I don't want to lose you, but I have to figure out how to respect you without the spotlight telling me to." I read it once. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer beside our old wedding photo, neither discarded, neither forgotten. She moved in with her sister temporarily. Said it was just for now. I didn't ask for a deadline. Life didn't slow down. If anything, it hit the gas. My phone started ringing with numbers I didn't recognize. People from other cities, other states, asking how to start their own version of what we'd launched. Foundations, trade schools, job training centers. They'd seen the articles. They wanted blueprints, not just for buildings, but for belief. My parents called more often. My mom asked if she could help volunteer at the next foundation event. I told her yes, with one condition. "Show up for me," I said, "the way you show up for Jared." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not defensive. Just realization. She agreed. Jared started texting regularly. Dumb things, mostly. Memes, jokes, random updates about his grill. But the tone had changed. No more one-upping. Just trying. And maybe that's what counted most now. At the ribbon cutting for our first training center, 3,000 square feet of tools, workbenches, classrooms, and open hope, I stood behind the podium and scanned the crowd. My apprentices were there, lined up in matching polos with the Trade Future Foundation logo on their sleeves. Some of them had their parents with them. Some stood alone, shoulders back, heads high. My parents came. They sat in the second row. My mom wore a button with my name on it. My dad brought a clipboard like he was going to take notes on how to be present. Jared showed up too, this time in a clean shirt. No barbecue sauce. Camille wasn't there. I told myself I didn't expect her to be. But it still landed heavy. Not in anger. Not even disappointment. Just wait. That night, I got a letter. An actual letter. No return address on the envelope, just my name in careful block letters. I opened it at the kitchen table, the one that still had 2 chairs even though only one had been used in weeks. Inside was a note from a teenage boy in Atlanta. His name was Damien. He'd seen a clip of my speech online and sent the letter through the foundation's website. They always told me I wasn't smart enough for college, he wrote. I thought maybe that meant I wasn't good enough for anything. But watching you speak, seeing how people clapped for a guy who builds with his hands, I don't know. It gave me something I didn't know I needed. A way forward. You make working with your hands look honorable. That line wrecked me. I sat there, shoulders heavy, hands trembling, and cried for the first time in a long time. Not because I was sad, not even because I was proud, but because for the first time in my life, I felt seen, not tolerated, not patronized, not acknowledged out of guilt or formality. Seen. It made all the years of invisibility worth something. Every rolled eye, every dismissive chuckle, every time someone called me just the gutter guy, all of it became scaffolding for this moment. A boy I'd never met felt less alone because I showed up for myself. And that mattered. I pinned Damien's letter to the corkboard above my desk. Right next to it, I tacked on a second note, this one from one of my apprentices, Maria. It simply said, "Thanks for giving me a second chance before I even asked for one." The board kept filling up after that. Letters, notes, messages, small but powerful reminders that what we were building wasn't just a foundation, it was a future. Even if some of the people closest to me had taken too long to recognize it, others were finding it exactly when they needed to. And for the first time, I realized something simple, something freeing. Respect doesn't have to start at home. Sometimes it starts where the broken things live. And that's always been my specialty. The second Trade Future Foundation event was smaller, more intimate, no press this time, no velvet ropes or city officials in tailored suits. Just a warehouse filled with promise, work tables arranged in neat rows, and the sharp, proud scent of sawdust in the air. It was the kind of space that didn't demand attention, but earned it. We were hosting a community outreach day. Families were invited. Kids too young for the program came to see what their big brothers or sisters were building. I watched a 10-year-old girl hold a power drill like it was a magic wand, her eyes wide with wonder. Her mom stood nearby, hand on her chest like she'd just witnessed a future crack open. And then I saw her, Camille. She was standing beside the welcome table, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand. She was checking people in, smiling, giving directions, handing out flyers like she'd been doing it all her life. I froze for a second. We hadn't spoken since the ribbon cutting. No fights, no drama, just space. Clean and distant. I hadn't expected her to show up. I certainly hadn't expected her to volunteer. She looked different. Not in the obvious ways, but in the quiet ones. Calmer. More grounded. There was no designer handbag slung over her shoulder. No pointed stares or tight-lipped glances at her phone. Just a woman standing behind a folding table, asking the next guest if they had any dietary restrictions before handing them a name badge. I walked over, unsure what to say. She beat me to it. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "Familiar." "Hi," I replied, glancing at the name tag pinned to her chest. It didn't say Camille Wells. Just Camille, outreach volunteer. She followed my eyes. Didn't want to assume the last name. I raised a brow. Fair enough. "I emailed the coordinator last week," she continued, glancing at the guest list. "Asked if you needed help. Didn't want to make a scene." "You didn't," I said. "You're doing great." She looked at me then, really looked. No pride. No pity. Just the kind of honesty that comes from stripping down everything and standing in what's left. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. "Not just about what I missed, but why I missed it. I nodded, hands resting in the pockets of my jeans. And I let the wrong things define you. I let the wrong people define me. We stood there for a moment, quiet in the noise of happy chatter and the whir of drills from the back room. I'm not asking to fix everything, she said. Not today. Maybe not ever. I just want to be part of what you're building, whatever way you'll let me. That landed harder than I expected. Because for years, I've been building with no one beside me, laying bricks for dreams no one believed in. And here she was, not trying to take credit, not trying to pose for a photo, just standing there with open hands, asking for a job. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. Later that afternoon, I watched her kneel down to help a little boy glue wood pieces into a birdhouse. She wasn't dressed for photos. Her knees were probably going to stain, but she laughed, full and easy, and it reminded me of a version of her I hadn't seen in a long time, one that didn't need red dresses or stage lights to feel present. Rebuilding a marriage isn't like rebuilding a roof. There's no checklist, no final inspection, just effort, repeated, daily, quietly, but she showed up. That was a start. My family came to more events after that. Not all of them, not always on time, but they showed up differently. Jared stopped trying to outshine me and started asking how he could support. My dad helped lay down floor mats in the new training wing. My mom brought cookies for the apprentices every Saturday, even though no one asked her to. And me? I kept building. Not because I had to prove something anymore, but because it's who I am. I'm not just the gutter guy. I'm the one who shows up when something's falling apart. The one who figures out how to hold it together, even when it doesn't look like it can be saved. So when someone approached me at that event and said, "Hey, aren't you the guy whose birthday party went viral?" I just smiled. "Yeah," I said. They didn't come at first. I looked across the room at Camille, laughing with a teen apprentice, hair frizzing from the humidity, no makeup, no mask. It was a quiet morning, the kind that made me feel like everything was exactly where it needed to be. The air smelled of fresh coffee, the kind I had been meaning to switch out for something healthier but never did. The sun filtered through the blinds of my Charlotte condo, cutting soft golden lines across my kitchen counter as I settled into my usual spot. Coffee in one hand, my laptop open in front of me. It was my morning ritual, a small slice of peace before the chaos of work took over. Then my email chimed. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. Maybe a report from my assistant or an update from my real estate investment firm, where I spent most of my time managing properties across the state. Instead, her name flashed across the screen. Sarah, my wife. Or at least, she had been my wife. The subject line was short, almost casual. Moving on. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before clicking it open. And then, just like that, my world split clean down the middle. The first thing I saw was a photo. Sarah, draped across the shoulders of some kid, her arms wrapped around his waist, grinning like she had just won the lottery. The two of them stood in front of my vacation home, the one I had paid for, the one I had spent years dreaming about. And there they were, smug, comfortable, as if they belonged there, as if I had been nothing more than a stepping stone to their new life. Beneath the photo, a message. The house is mine now. I've already moved in with Jake. My lawyer will send over the divorce papers. Don't bother fighting it. The deed is in my name. That was it. No apologies. No explanations. Just a declaration. I set my coffee down, exhaling slowly. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. If anything, a strange kind of calm settled over me, the kind that came right before a storm. Sarah had always been reckless, impulsive. She liked the idea of winning, but she had never been good at the long game. And this was a childish move. She thought she had backed me into a corner, that I would roll over and let her take what wasn't hers. I stretched my fingers, let them hover over the keyboard for a moment, then typed a single reply. Are you sure about that? I hit send, blocked her number, and finished my coffee. She had just declared war, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs weren't just there. They were flashing in neon, practically screaming at me. But like any man too focused on his work, I had convinced myself that Sarah was just going through a phase, that whatever was making her distant, distracted, and increasingly irritable would pass. Now, sitting in my office, replaying the past few months in my head, I could see it for what it really was. She had been planning this for a long time. It started with the weekend trips to the vacation house. At first, they seemed innocent enough. Sarah had always loved spending time by the lake, and since I was constantly busy managing my real estate investment firm, I figured it was good for her to get away, to clear her head. She claimed she needed the space to be creative for her interior design projects. But then the trips became more frequent. Then they became secretive. She stopped inviting me, brushing off my questions with half-hearted excuses. You wouldn't enjoy it, babe. It's just me relaxing, brainstorming ideas for my next house flip. I let it go. I told myself that after 6 years of marriage, people needed their own space. Then came the late-night phone calls. I would catch glimpses of her sitting on the balcony, hushed whispers into her phone, her voice carrying that forced casual tone of someone who didn't want to be overheard. I asked her about it once. She gave me an exaggerated laugh and rolled her eyes. Relax, Jason. It's just my designer friends. We're brainstorming layouts. She had always been a good liar. But I had been a fool. The real wake-up call should have been the shift in the way she treated me. I still remember the night I told her about a huge investment deal I had closed. I was excited, proud, wanting to share the moment with her. It was a milestone deal, one that would secure us financially for decades. She had barely looked up from her phone. "That's great, babe," she had said, her voice flat. No excitement, no pride, no nothing. That was when I should have known. Sarah had stopped seeing my success as ours. She had started treating it as hers. She loved to play the role of the successful investor's wife, the woman who rubbed elbows with the elite at real estate galas, the one who casually mentioned her involvement in my business to anyone who would listen. But the truth? She hadn't lifted a damn finger. Sarah was an interior designer who dabbled in house flipping, and by dabbled, I meant she had picked out throw pillows and wallpaper while I funded the entire operation. Her name was on the projects, but the money? The connections? The actual work? That was all me. The same went for the vacation house. It had been my dream. I had paid for it outright, thinking it would be a place for us to escape the stress of the city, a place where we could build memories. But Sarah had insisted on putting her name on the deed. "It's for tax purposes," she had told me. "Trust me, it's just a formality." I had agreed, mostly because I hadn't seen a reason to argue. What she didn't know was that before signing anything, I had my lawyer draft documents protecting my investment, because while Sarah liked to play the long game, I had spent years mastering it. And that house? It was mine. She had no idea how wrong she was. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my office ceiling. My hands curled into fists as I thought about that email again, the smug arrogance dripping from every word. She thought she had played me. She thought she had won. But she had made one fatal mistake. She underestimated me. I turned to my computer and logged into my security system. Months ago, I had installed cameras at the vacation home for insurance purposes, ensuring that if anything ever happened to the property, I'd have evidence. At the time, I hadn't realized they would serve an entirely different purpose. I clicked on the live feed, and there they were. Sarah and Jake, her new 23-year-old boyfriend, lounging by the pool, sipping champagne like they were celebrating a victory. Jake had the arrogance of a kid who had never built anything for himself, the kind of smug confidence that came from knowing someone else was footing the bill. He was wearing my bathrobe, drinking my whiskey, living in my house. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. I scrolled back through weeks of footage. Sarah sneaking him in at night. Jake walking around shirtless, driving my car. The two of them hosting private little dinner parties, acting like they had already wiped me from existence. My chest tightened, but not from heartbreak. That wasn't what this was. This was strategy. Sarah had just handed me every piece of evidence I needed to destroy her. The money she had siphoned from our accounts, the property she thought she had stolen, the affair she had so carelessly paraded in front of my cameras. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to send angry texts or drunken voicemails begging for explanations. I was going to be patient, because Sarah had declared war, and she was about to learn that I never lost. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tapping against the desk as I let the reality of what I had just seen settle in. Sarah and her boy toy, Jake, lounging in my vacation home, sipping expensive whiskey they hadn't earned, parading around in what they thought was their new kingdom. It was almost laughable, the way they moved through the house like they had claimed it, like they had already erased me from its walls. I didn't feel sadness. That stage had passed the second I opened her email. What filled me now was something colder, sharper, a focused, simmering rage that wasn't about vengeance for the sake of ego. No, this was about correction. About making sure that Sarah learned exactly who she had tried to play. I turned back to the security footage on my laptop, rewinding to the earliest recordings. I wanted to see how far back this betrayal really went. How long had this been happening under my nose while I was too distracted by work to notice? A month. Maybe 2. The first few recordings showed Sarah arriving alone, bags in hand, the way she always had when she went on her so-called weekend retreats. Then, the changes started creeping in. First, small things. The way she spent more time outside on the deck, looking at her phone with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Excitement. The kind of look she used to give me. Then, Jake appeared. He didn't start off bold. The first recording of him showed him sneaking in late at night, Sarah waiting at the door, pulling him inside with a giggle, like a damn teenager. From there, they grew bolder. Jake started coming and going freely, moving around the house like he belonged there. Wearing my shirts, my cologne, driving my car. It was the kind of arrogance that came from a man who thought he had already won. I paused the footage, staring at the screen, my jaw tightening. They had no idea I had been watching them. But now? Now it was my turn to move. I pushed away from my desk and grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on Daniel's name. My lawyer. My oldest friend. The man who knew how to turn a mistake into an execution. He picked up on the second ring. Jason, what's up? I didn't waste time. I need to make sure Sarah is removed from the vacation house. There was a short pause. You finally kicking her out? Something like that, I said, my voice steady. She thinks she owns it. Sent me an email this morning, flaunting her new boyfriend, telling me the house is hers now. She has no idea I have security footage of them living there like squatters. Daniel let out a slow, amused exhale. She really thinks she pulled this off, huh? She does, I confirmed. But we both know the deed may be in her name, but ownership isn't. Exactly, Daniel said, his voice turning sharp. You paid for that house in full, and we made sure you had the right documents to prove it. Sarah has no legal claim to it. She just thinks she does. And now I want to make sure she finds out the hard way. Daniel chuckled. All right. First things first. I'll start the eviction process. We'll hit her with a formal notice, giving her a week to vacate. If she refuses, we escalate. Perfect, I said. Anything else? I hesitated for a beat, then leaned forward, my voice lowering. She's been draining our accounts. I want to know where the money went. Daniel's tone darkened. How much are we talking? Over 150 grand, I said. Gone. A low whistle. Damn. All right. I'll pull the financial records and see where it went. If she moved it into an offshore account, we might not be able to get it back, but we can use it against her in court. Do it. I'll call you once I have something, Daniel said. I hung up and exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers against my temples. I had spent years building a bulletproof empire, carefully securing every asset, every investment, making sure that no matter what happened, I would never be taken advantage of. And now, Sarah was about to learn what happened when she tried. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and pulled up the security feed one last time before bed. Sarah and Jake were in my living room, stretched out on my couch, watching a movie on my television. Jake had his feet propped up on the coffee table, looking completely at ease, as if he belonged there. Sarah leaned against him, sipping a glass of wine, laughing at something he said. It was almost funny, watching them, knowing what was coming, because by this time next week, they would be homeless. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I had no intention of sending Sarah a warning. She would find out when the papers hit her doorstep, and when she did, I hoped she looked back at this moment, this pathetic, delusional moment of triumph, and realized exactly what she had done. Because in less than 7 days, She was going to lose everything, and I was going to make sure she felt every second of it. The morning after speaking with Daniel, I woke up feeling something I hadn't in a long time: calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from peace, but the kind that settles in right before a battle. The kind that sharpens the mind, focuses the body, makes every move deliberate. I wasn't rushing into this. I wasn't acting out of emotion. I was executing a plan. And Sarah? She had no idea what was coming. I got dressed and made myself a strong cup of coffee, then sat down at my desk to check my financial accounts. I wasn't expecting anything new. I had already caught Sarah siphoning money, but I wanted to see just how deep the damage went. I logged in and scrolled through the transactions, my jaw tightening as the numbers loaded. There it was. $150,000 gone. She hadn't taken it all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, she had done it gradually, transferring smaller amounts over several months, slipping the money into an account I didn't recognize. A name popped up next to one of the transfers. JT Holdings. I frowned. That wasn't an offshore bank. It wasn't a foreign account hidden in some tax haven. I typed the name into a business registry search and hit enter. And that's when I felt my stomach turn. JT Holdings was registered under one name: Jake Turner. The little boy toy Sarah had left me for wasn't just some random fling. He was the one holding my stolen money. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. That changed things. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was fraud. I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel. He answered after the second ring. "Tell me you have good news," he said. I let out a humorless chuckle. "That depends on how you define good news. Talk to me." Sarah didn't just take my money. She transferred it into an account under Jake's name. Turns out he has his own little shell company. Daniel was quiet for a beat. "That's interesting, isn't it?" I said, almost like she wasn't just planning to leave me. She was setting him up with my money. "That's not just theft, Jason," Daniel said, his voice taking on a sharp edge. "That's financial fraud. We can take legal action. Freeze the accounts. Go after both of them." I smirked. "That's exactly what I want to do." Daniel let out a low whistle. "All right, let's start with an injunction to freeze the funds. I'll file the paperwork today. We need to move before they realize we're onto them." "Good. Do it." "One more thing," Daniel said. "Eviction papers are going out today. She should get them in the next 24 hours. You want to bet how she reacts?" I grinned. "Oh, I already know." That evening, I logged into my vacation house security feed and pulled up the camera aimed at the front door. I didn't have to wait long. At 6:45 p.m., a process server arrived. A young guy in a button-up shirt and a leather folder tucked under his arm. He rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Sarah appeared. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, her hair in a messy bun, a glass of wine in one hand. She probably thought it was a package delivery or one of her new furniture pieces arriving. But when the guy handed her the papers, her entire expression changed. She read the first few lines, and I saw it. The exact moment reality hit her. Her face blanched. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was struggling to form a sentence. Then, she looked up, furious. She said something too quiet for the cameras to catch, then slammed the door in his face. I smirked, sipping my bourbon. There it was. The panic. She had just realized she was standing in a house that wasn't hers. And soon, she wouldn't be standing in it at all. The next morning, Sarah tried to call me. I let it ring. Then, she sent an email. Subject: "Let's be adults about this." I opened it, already knowing what it would say. "Jason, you don't have to do this. I know you're hurt, but we don't have to be cruel to each other. I just want what's fair. Let's talk." Fair. She had the audacity to use that word after stealing my money, sleeping in my house with her new boy, and then trying to push me out like I was nothing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I forwarded the email to Daniel with a single message. "Make sure the financial freeze is locked in today." By noon, the accounts were frozen. Jake wouldn't be able to access a single dollar. I had just cut off their entire lifeline. That night, Sarah called again. This time, I answered. The moment she heard my voice, she launched into a speech. "Jason, you can't do this. That money was..." "Mine," I cut in. It was mine, Sarah. Every dollar. Every cent. And now, you don't have access to it. Neither does your little boyfriend. She sputtered. You can't. This is illegal, Jason. I chuckled. Illegal? You stole from me, Sarah. You committed financial fraud. You transferred my money into another man's account. Do you know what the penalty is for that? She went silent. You should look it up, I said. You might be seeing a courtroom sooner than you think. Jason, please, she said, her voice dropping. It wasn't like that. I hung up because I didn't care anymore. Sarah had spent months preparing for this. She had built a plan, convinced herself she had one before the game even started. But now, she was watching her entire future crumble in real time. And I wasn't done yet. That night, I checked the security feed one last time. Jake was pacing around the living room, his hands in his hair, yelling at Sarah. She was on the couch, head in her hands. They were falling apart. And this was only the beginning, because soon, they wouldn't just be broke. They'd be homeless. The storm had officially begun. Sarah just didn't know how bad it was going to get. By the next morning, her accounts were completely frozen. No access to the money she stole. No way to fund her new life with Jake. She had played the long game, carefully siphoning my money into his name, thinking she was untouchable. Now, she was waking up to the reality that she had nothing. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee as I waited for the inevitable. It didn't take long. My phone rang. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. By the fourth call, I decided to pick up. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the exact moment she realized how badly she had miscalculated. I answered, keeping my voice calm. Hello? Jason, what the hell have you done? I smirked, leaning back in my chair. Morning to you too, Sarah. Sleep well? You froze my accounts, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? I let out a slow breath, feigning confusion. What I've done? No, Sarah. This is about what you did. You stole from me. You funneled money into your boy toys account like I wouldn't notice. And now, you're facing the consequences. Her breath hitched. It wasn't, Jason, listen. I know you're mad, but I didn't steal. You didn't? I interrupted. Then explain how $150,000 ended up in Jake's name. Explain why I have paperwork tying you to fraudulent transactions. Because I have everything, Sarah. Every single receipt. Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the desperate search for an excuse that would get her out of this. Jason, we can fix this, she said finally, her voice softer, calculated. Let's just talk. Face to face. We were married for 6 years. That has to mean something. I smiled. There it was. The desperation. Sarah, I said evenly. The only thing that means something to me is watching you get exactly what you deserve. Then I hung up. By noon, Daniel called with an update. The court order is finalized, he said. Sarah and Jake can't touch those funds. Legally, it's frozen until we go to trial. But based on the fraud evidence, it won't even make it that far. The judge will award the money back to you. I grinned. So they're broke? Beyond broke, Daniel confirmed. And that's not even the best part. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, Daniel chuckled. Sarah's eviction notice was served this morning. She has 7 days to vacate. If she refuses, we file for forced removal. I let out a slow breath, nodding. Good. Keep me posted. Will do. But Jason? Yeah, this is going to get ugly. I smirked. It already is. That night, I logged into the security feed at the vacation house. Sarah and Jake were in full meltdown mode. Jake was pacing the living room, yelling, his hands in his hair. Sarah sat on the couch, her head buried in her hands. I turned up the volume. How the hell did this happen, Sarah? Jake snapped. You told me the money was safe. I thought it was. She shot back. I didn't think he'd. She stopped, rubbing her temples. God, I don't know. Jason was never supposed to fight me on this. Jake let out a humorless laugh. Well, newsflash. He did. And now we're screwed. I chuckled to myself. They had underestimated me. Now, they were drowning. And soon, they'd be homeless. The next morning, I woke up to another email from Sarah. Subject: please, let's be civil. I rolled my eyes and opened it. Jason, I know we've had our differences, but this doesn't have to be like this. I understand you're upset, but I don't deserve to be punished like this. Can we at least talk? Please? Sarah. I smirked. Punished? This wasn't punishment. This was justice. I forwarded the email to Daniel with a note. No response. Keep the eviction process moving. 2 days later, I got another update. Jake had tried to withdraw funds from his account, only to realize it had been frozen. The idiot actually walked into his bank and caused a scene, demanding answers. The manager had called security on him. Sarah, on the other hand, had spent the day calling realtors, trying to find a new place to live. No one would approve her, because thanks to Daniel, her credit had been flagged for financial fraud. That evening, I got a text from Daniel. She's trying to contact the judge to delay the eviction. She's out of options. I laughed, shaking my head. And what's the judge saying? Daniel's reply was simple. Denied. 7 days. No extensions. Sarah had run out of moves. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. And soon, she would have nothing. 3 days later, I checked the security feed again. Sarah was packing. Jake was gone. I raised an eyebrow, scrolling through the footage. He had left the night before, suitcase in hand, slamming the door behind him. I checked my email. A forwarded message from Daniel. Subject: Jake bails. Jason. Looks like Jake jumped ship. I had a PI check. He booked a flight to Miami this morning. Looks like he's running. Daniel. I grinned. Jake was smart enough to know when a sinking ship wasn't worth saving. Sarah, on the other hand, she was still standing in the wreckage, hoping for a miracle. The final blow came the day before her eviction deadline. Sarah showed up at my office. She stood in the lobby, looking disheveled, desperate. I watched from behind the glass wall as my assistant told her, calmly, that I wasn't available. Sarah's face twisted. I expected her to scream, to beg. Instead, she turned, walked toward the door, and stopped. Then, without looking back, she left. That was it. The end of Sarah Carter. The woman who had tried to steal my future had just lost hers. And I had one. Sarah had never been one to admit defeat easily. She had always been the kind of person who twisted reality until it suited her, convinced that if she just lied well enough, if she cried at the right moment, if she played the victim perfectly, she could get away with anything. But not this time. This time, she had nothing left to twist. The morning of her final day in my house, I woke up early, poured myself a coffee, and opened my laptop. The security feed from the vacation home was already queued up. I didn't need to watch it. I already knew how this story ended. But there was something satisfying about seeing it unfold in real time. Sarah was standing in the middle of the living room, her suitcases half-packed, her face pale. She moved sluggishly, as if the reality of her situation had only just started to settle in. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was her life unraveling. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts, her fingers twitching slightly as she hovered over a name. Then, as if she had no other choice, she called me. I stared at the ringing screen, debating whether I should pick up. Then, finally, I answered. Jason, she said, her voice small. I don't know what to do. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of coffee. That's not my problem, Sarah. She let out a sharp breath. You don't have to be like this. Like what? I asked calmly. Like someone who refuses to be taken advantage of? Like someone who wants to see me suffer, she snapped. I get it, Jason. I do. I hurt you. But what do you want from me? To see me homeless? Is that what this is? I exhaled, shaking my head. Sarah, you chose this. You wanted this. You wanted a life without me? Congratulations. You got it. She went silent. You have until the end of the day to get out of my house, I said, my voice firm. If you're still there by midnight, the police will remove you. Your choice. She let out a quiet, broken laugh. You really hate me now, don't you? I didn't hesitate. I feel nothing for you, Sarah. Nothing at all. Then I hung up. At 5 p.m., I checked the security feed again. Sarah had moved to the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. She looked different now. Not like the woman who had written that smug email. Not like the woman who had flaunted her new life with Jake. That woman had been arrogant. This woman? She looked defeated. But it wasn't my job to feel sorry for her. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. By 8:30 p.m., Sarah had packed what little she could carry. She was on the phone again, but this time, she wasn't calling me. She was calling her friends, her family, anyone who might help her. No one answered. The same people she had once bragged to about leaving me, the same people who cheered her on when she moved in with Jake, they had all disappeared, because Sarah had burned every bridge she ever had. Now, she was stranded, and there was no one left to save her. At 11:45 p.m., she walked out the front door for the last time, a single suitcase in one hand, her phone in the other, her eyes hollow. She turned back once, staring at the house as if she still couldn't believe this was happening. Then, without a word, she walked away. The door locked behind her. It was over. The next morning, Daniel called me. "She's out," he confirmed. Sheriff's office went by this morning to confirm the eviction. She didn't fight it, just left quietly. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. "Good. You okay?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I am." Because for the first time in a long, long time, I finally felt free. For the next few weeks, Sarah disappeared. No emails, no phone calls, no more desperate attempts to talk. She had no money, no home, no boyfriend. Jake had left town, moving on to whatever easy scam he could find next. The money she had stolen was still frozen, and without a job or credit, she had nothing to fall back on. And me? I was moving on. I spent my mornings running my company, my nights reclaiming my time, my life. I even started traveling again, spending weekends at the vacation house, the way I had always meant to. And every time I sat out on the deck, looking at the view, I would think about how close I had been to losing everything. How close Sarah had come to taking everything I had worked for. But she didn't. She never could. Because in the end, she had played herself. 2 months later, I got one last email from her. Subject: "Can we talk?" I hesitated before opening it. "Jason, I know I don't deserve your time. I don't know where else to turn. I lost everything. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but if we could just talk, if you could just give me 5 minutes, I would appreciate it more than you know. Sarah." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because Sarah wasn't my problem anymore. She had made her choices. And now, she had to live with them. That weekend, I returned to the vacation house, opened a bottle of whiskey, and stood on the deck, watching the sun set over the lake. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Sarah. I wasn't thinking about revenge, or betrayal, or what could have been. I was just here, and it felt damn good. The days after Sarah's eviction were eerily quiet. Not in a bad way. Not in a way that made me feel lonely or regretful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a long, exhausting storm. The kind where you finally step outside, breathe in the fresh air, and realize you survived. She was gone. Her calls had stopped. Her emails had dried up. And, for the first time in years, my life belonged to me again. I wasn't spending my days watching for warning signs, second-guessing her words, wondering if she was lying, if she was scheming. That weight was gone. And in its place, freedom. Real, undeniable, unapologetic freedom. I poured myself a cup of coffee, standing at my kitchen counter, staring out at the city skyline. I had lived in Charlotte for over a decade, but I was seeing it differently now. This wasn't our city anymore. This wasn't our home. It was mine. And that realization? It felt better than I ever thought it would. Daniel called me later that morning, his tone casual. "How's life as a free man?" I smirked, taking a sip of coffee. "Quieter. Better." He chuckled. "Figured as much. Thought I'd give you a quick update. Sarah's been trying to fight the financial freeze, but the judge already ruled against her. She's not getting a dime." I leaned back in my chair, nodding. "Good." "She's also been couch surfing," Daniel added. "Tried to rent an apartment downtown, But with her credit flagged, no one's biting. Looks like she's out of options. I didn't feel anything when he said it. Not pity, not satisfaction, just acceptance. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Thanks for the update, I said, setting my coffee down. Anything else? Daniel hesitated. Yeah, actually, he said. There's something you should know. I frowned. What? Jake's back. I blinked, caught off guard. Back? You mean in Charlotte? Yeah, Daniel said. And not just that, he's been asking around about you. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders. Why? Word is, he's pissed. He lost all that money, and now he's blaming you for it. I snorted. Blaming me? For getting caught stealing? Yeah, Daniel said dryly. Because that makes sense. I sighed, shaking my head. What's he doing now? Not much, Daniel said. Just talking. Running his mouth at bars, making threats he's too stupid to follow through on. But I thought you should know. I exhaled, my jaw tightening. Jake was nothing more than a cockroach scrambling after crumbs, hoping to find some way to recover from his own failure. And as much as I wanted to ignore him, I knew better. Because men like Jake? They got reckless when they had nothing left to lose. That evening, I went to O'Malley's, a bar I hadn't been to in months. It was one of those places where everyone knew everyone, a dimly lit spot where business deals were made over whiskey, where old money brushed shoulders with new. And apparently, it was where Jake had been running his mouth. I stepped inside, scanning the crowd, my eyes landing on him instantly. He was sitting at the bar, hunched over a drink, looking nothing like the cocky kid who had once strutted around my house. He looked wrecked, disheveled, angry, and when he looked up and saw me, his entire body tensed. For a second, he hesitated, as if debating whether to make a scene. Then, against his better judgment, he got up and walked toward me. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching as he closed the distance between us, his hands clenched at his sides. Jason, he said, his voice tight. I raised an eyebrow. Jake. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his messy hair. I want my money back. I almost laughed. Almost. Your money? I asked, tilting my head. You mean my money? Jake's jaw clenched. Sarah gave it to me. I smirked. That's funny, because legally, it was never hers to give. Jake took a step closer, lowering his voice. You ruined my life. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. No, Jake. You ruined your own life. You saw an easy score, and you got sloppy. And now, you have nothing. His nostrils flared. I could still take you down. I chuckled. How? By whining at a bar? By making empty threats? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. You don't have the power to take down anyone. Not me. Not anyone else. You're a joke, Jake. And deep down, you know it. His face flushed red. His hands twitched, like he was debating whether to throw a punch. I almost hoped he would. Because, unlike him, I knew how to fight. But after a few seconds, he exhaled sharply, stepping back. You'll regret this, he muttered. I just smiled. Get in line. And with that, I turned and walked away. Jake didn't follow, because he knew the truth. He had already lost. I went home that night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sarah was gone. Jake was nothing more than a ghost of a bad decision. And me? I was finally free. 1 week later, I put the vacation house on the market. Not because I needed the money. Not because I wanted to forget. But because that house was never meant to be a battleground. It was meant to be an escape, a place of peace. And after everything, I was ready for something new. So I sold it. Bought a new place. One that Sarah had never stepped foot in. One that was entirely, undeniably mine. And as I stood on the deck of my new home, a whiskey in my hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking backward. I was looking forward. And the future? It had never looked better. 2 months had passed since I had wiped Sarah from my life. And with each passing day, I felt lighter. There were no more calls, no more desperate emails, no more pathetic attempts to salvage what she had willingly destroyed. She had taken her shot, thought she had played me, but in the end, She had been the one left in ruins. I had sold the vacation house, moved into a sleek, modern penthouse that had zero history attached to her. This was my fresh start, and I was finally living. I poured myself a drink, stepping onto my balcony, the city skyline stretching before me. Charlotte had always been my home, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it belonged to us. It belonged to me. I wasn't the man Sarah had tried to manipulate anymore. That version of me died the moment she walked out. Now, I was rebuilt, sharper, smarter, unforgiving. I had learned my lesson, and I wasn't about to let anyone take advantage of me again. That weekend, I found myself at an exclusive business event, one of those invite-only gatherings where real estate moguls, tech investors, and CEOs exchanged handshakes over expensive scotch. It was the kind of room where deals worth millions were made in hushed conversations, the kind of place I belonged. But tonight was different, because as I moved through the crowd, nodding to familiar faces, I saw her. Not Sarah, Emily Donovan, the wife, now ex-wife, of Richard Donovan, my former business rival. She had been married to the man who had tried to undermine my company for years. The man who had worked with Sarah to try and sabotage me. And now, she was standing across the room, sipping a glass of wine, watching me. I raised an eyebrow, curious. Emily had always been an enigma in our circle. Smart, ruthless, untouchable. She had stayed married to Richard for years, despite the whispers, despite the rumors of his infidelities, his underhanded deals, his manipulations. But now she was divorced. Now, she was free. And judging by the way she was looking at me, she had something to say. I made my way over, my drink in hand, stopping just close enough to see the flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Jason Carter," she said smoothly, tilting her head. "I was wondering if you'd show up tonight." I smirked. "You were looking for me?" "Something like that," she admitted, taking a sip of her wine. "Word around town is that you single-handedly dismantled my ex-husband's best scheme, that you took him down without even breaking a sweat." I chuckled. Richard was never as smart as he thought he was. Her lips curved. "No, he wasn't." I studied her for a moment. Emily wasn't like Sarah. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't impulsive. She was calculated, precise. And the fact that she was standing here, talking to me, seeking me out, that meant something. "So tell me," I said, leaning in slightly, "why are you really here?" She smiled, swirling the wine in her glass. "Because I like to keep my eye on the men who know how to win." I raised an eyebrow. And I think you and I could be very useful to each other," she murmured. "Business-wise, of course." "Of course," I echoed, smirking. But we both knew that wasn't the only thing she was implying. This was a woman who saw an opportunity and seized it. And right now, I was her opportunity. The question was, did I want to take the risk? The rest of the night passed in a blur of conversations, introductions, and high-stakes networking. Emily and I kept circling each other, exchanging sharp glances, unspoken challenges. She was testing me, and I was letting her. By the time the event started winding down, she had slipped me her number, her voice low as she said, "Think about it." And I did, because Emily wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a player. And if I was going to step into this new phase of my life, into a world where I was no longer just reacting, but controlling, I needed to be surrounded by people who understood the game, people who knew how to play to win. Emily Donovan? She understood. The next morning, I stared at her number on my phone, debating. I could ignore it, walk away, keep my life as clean and uncomplicated as I had made it, or I could see where this led. I exhaled. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I sent her a text. "Let's talk." Her reply came almost instantly. "Tonight. My place. 8 p.m. I smirked. Emily Donovan didn't waste time, and neither did I. That evening, I found myself standing outside her penthouse, my hands in my pockets, my mind sharp. I wasn't here to be reckless. I wasn't here to make mistakes. I was here because I was curious. Emily opened the door, her expression unreadable. "You showed up," she said, stepping aside. I walked in, glancing around. Her place was impressive. Modern, cold, The kind of home owned by someone who had learned to never let emotions cloud judgment. She poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing me one. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. I studied her for a moment. Then, slowly, I clinked my glass against hers. "To new beginnings," I agreed. And just like that, the game had begun. Emily Donovan was not the kind of woman you walked into something with lightly. She was sharp, calculated, and, most importantly, she never played a game she wasn't sure she could win. I knew that before I even stepped into her penthouse. But as I sat across from her, whiskey in hand, watching the way she studied me, like I was an investment she was weighing the risks of, I realized something. This wasn't just a casual business conversation. This was a test, and I wasn't about to fail. She leaned back against the sleek leather couch, swirling her drink lazily, as if she had all the time in the world. "You and I have something in common," she said finally. I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Do we?" She smirked. "We both know what it's like to be stabbed in the back by the wrong people." I chuckled, taking a slow sip of my whiskey. "I suppose we do. Difference is," she continued, tilting her head, "I didn't just survive it. I used it. I turned it into something better. You're still deciding what comes next." Her words were calculated, intentional, a challenge. She wanted to see if I'd take the bait. I set my glass down, exhaling slowly. "I'm not the same man I was a few months ago, Emily." Her gaze flickered with something unreadable. "No, you're not." I smirked. "And that's why I'm here." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Good answer." She stood, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city, her reflection barely visible against the backdrop of Charlotte's skyline. "I don't waste my time with people who aren't useful to me," she admitted, glancing over her shoulder. "So tell me, Jason, are you useful?" I leaned back, watching her. "That depends. What do you want from me?" Her smile widened slightly. "Partnership." I raised an eyebrow. "Business or otherwise?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Let's start with business." She turned, walking back toward me, setting her glass down on the table. "You built something impressive with your real estate firm. But now, you're at a crossroads. You could expand. You could dominate. Or you could play it safe." I studied her. "And I assume you have a way to help me dominate?" Emily's eyes gleamed. "I do." She sat down across from me again, crossing one leg over the other. "Richard made a lot of enemies before his empire crumbled. People who would rather do business with anyone but him. And you have access to those people, I guessed?" She nodded. "I do. But more importantly, I know how to move money, how to structure deals in a way that ensures maximum profit with minimal risk. I spent years watching Richard play dirty. I know the tricks, the loopholes, the strategies." I chuckled. "And now you want to use them against him?" She smirked. "Why waste a perfectly good education?" I liked the way she thought. More importantly, I liked the way she never looked back. Emily had spent years being underestimated, just like I had. And now, she was rebuilding, just like I was. I exhaled, tapping my fingers against the glass in my hand. "And what do you get out of this partnership?" Her gaze held mine, unwavering. "I get to work with someone who isn't afraid to take what he deserves." She leaned forward slightly. "Are you that man, Jason?" I let a slow smile spread across my face. "You already know the answer to that." The next morning, I found myself sitting in my office, reviewing the proposal Emily had sent over at 2 a.m. She didn't sleep much. Neither did I. The more I read, the more I realized she wasn't exaggerating. Emily knew the game. She had connections I didn't, leverage I hadn't even considered. And, most importantly, she knew how to move without leaving a trace. She had spent years watching Richard build and burn bridges. Now, she was using what she learned to create something untouchable. I exhaled, picking up my phone. I called her. She answered on the first ring. "Changed your mind already?" she mused. I smirked. "I never had to change it. I just wanted to see if you were as serious as you sounded last night." And I'm in." A pause. Then, a satisfied hum. "Good." I leaned back in my chair. "Let's set up a meeting. Go over the details." "Already ahead of you," she said smoothly. My office. Tonight. 7 p.m. I chuckled. You don't waste time, do you? She laughed softly. Neither do you. And just like that, the deal was set. That night, I walked into Emily's office, a sleek, modern space that screamed power. She was waiting for me, a glass of wine in hand, a folder open on the desk. You're late, she teased. I smirked, shutting the door behind me. I wanted to make sure you missed me. She arched an eyebrow, amused. Careful, Jason. I'm not as easy to impress as Sarah was. I chuckled. Good. I don't do easy anymore. Her gaze flickered with something sharp, something undeniably intrigued. Let's get started, she murmured, pushing the folder toward me. I took a seat, flipping through the pages, taking in every detail of our new empire in the making. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about getting back at Sarah or Richard or anyone else. This was about something bigger. This was about winning. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just playing the game. I was controlling it. The moment I stepped into Emily's office that night, I knew I had entered a different world. One where power wasn't just about how much money you had in your account, but about how you moved, who you knew, and what you controlled without anyone realizing it. Emily was already seated behind her glass-top desk, sipping a glass of wine, a confident smirk playing on her lips. She didn't greet me with pleasantries. She didn't waste time asking about my day. Instead, she slid a thick folder across the desk toward me. Everything you need to know is in there, she said smoothly. Take your time. I picked up the folder and flipped it open. The first thing I saw was a list of names. Business owners, investors, developers. Some were familiar, some weren't. But all of them had one thing in common. They had been burned by Richard Donovan. Emily had cataloged every single one of them. How much money they had lost. What kind of deals had fallen through. Who was still looking for revenge. I let out a low whistle, shaking my head. You really did your homework. Emily smirked, taking another sip of her wine. I don't believe in surprises. If I'm making a move, I know every possible outcome before I do it. I kept flipping through the pages. The second section was a financial breakdown. Emily had already lined up potential backers, silent investors who wanted in on real estate projects, but didn't want to be publicly attached to them. This is how we win, Jason, she continued, leaning forward. We take the best pieces of what Richard built and make them ours. The clients, the investors, the deals, everything he lost, we claim it, quietly, without him even realizing it's happening until it's too late. I smirked, setting the folder down. You want to dismantle his legacy. She tilted her head. I want to build our own. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. And what's your role in this? She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. I handle the money, the connections. I make sure everything flows smoothly. You're the face. The one who takes the meetings, shakes the hands, secures the deals. You're the man who everyone wants to trust. I studied her carefully. She wasn't just pitching a business plan. She was offering me something bigger. Power, control, a chance to rewrite my future on my own terms. I tapped my fingers against the desk. And if I say yes? Emily's eyes gleamed. Then we make a hell of a lot of money. The next morning, I signed the paperwork. It was official. Emily and I were now partners. And the moment the ink dried, the first phase of the plan went into motion. We didn't go after Richard Donovan directly. That would have been too obvious, too messy. Instead, we started picking off his assets one by one. Investors who had pulled out of his projects? We gave them better terms. Real estate developments he had abandoned? We bought them at a fraction of their original cost. Within 3 months, we had absorbed nearly half of what he lost. And the best part? He had no idea I was behind it. One evening, Emily and I met at a high-end steakhouse to celebrate. She was dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look even more dangerous than usual. You've done well, she said as she swirled her wine. Better than I expected. I smirked. You thought I'd fumble? She chuckled. I thought you'd hesitate, but you didn't. You moved quickly, efficiently. You played this perfectly. I raised an eyebrow. And that surprises you? She held my gaze. No, It impresses me. There was something in the way she said it. Something undeniable. For the past few months, we had kept things strictly business. But now? Now there was an edge to our interactions. A dangerous pull. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. So tell me, Emily, what comes next? She took a slow sip of her wine, her lips curling into a smirk. Now, she murmured. Now we make sure Richard knows exactly who did this to him. The next week, we made our first public move. A deal that Richard had been trying to revive, a high-end development on the outskirts of Charlotte, was put back on the market. Emily and I swooped in, making an offer that couldn't be refused. And just like that, Richard Donovan's last chance at clawing his way back into the game was gone. He didn't find out until after the deal was sealed. And when he did, he lost it. I got a call from Daniel 2 days later. Richard knows, he said simply. I smirked. How mad is he? Mad enough to make a scene, Daniel replied. He's been calling every contact he has, trying to figure out how this happened. He knows your name is attached, but he has no proof that you were the one orchestrating everything. Good, I murmured. Let him stew. Daniel chuckled. You really don't play fair, do you? I smirked. Fair is for people who lose. And I had never been a loser. The following evening, I got a text from Emily. Richard is furious. We should celebrate. My place. 9 p.m. I stared at the message for a moment. I knew what this was. This wasn't about business anymore. This was about crossing a line we had both been towing for months. I exhaled. Then I typed a reply. On my way. When I arrived, Emily was waiting for me with a glass of whiskey in hand. She didn't speak. She didn't waste time with words. She just handed me the drink, smirking as she leaned against the doorframe. You've done well, Jason, she murmured. I took a sip, meeting her gaze. You too. Silence stretched between us. The tension was undeniable. And when she finally stepped closer, when she reached for my tie and pulled me toward her, I didn't stop her. Because this was inevitable. From the moment we met, from the moment we decided to burn everything down and rebuild it together, this had always been where we were headed. Emily wasn't just my partner. She was my equal. And tonight, she was mine. The next morning, as I lay in her bed, watching the city wake up through the massive windows of her penthouse, I realized something. I had spent years being used, played, discarded. But now I was the one in control. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. And the future? It had never looked better. I was 17, barely a man, when everything I knew about safety, about home, about family crumbled. I still remember the exact moment Talia walked into my room, pale-faced, clutching a plastic stick in her shaking hand. Jordan, she whispered. Just my name, nothing else. But the way her voice cracked made me stand. I took the test from her without flinching. 2 red lines. That tiny symbol might as well have been a detonator. My heart pounded like it was trying to leap out of my chest, but I swallowed it down and looked at her. We'll figure it out, I said. Because what else was there to say? Love meant standing still when the world tilted. I told my parents that same evening. I couldn't keep it from them. I was raised on truth, or so I thought. I expected disappointment, maybe some shouting, but what I got was fire. You've disgraced us, my father roared, slamming his fist on the dining table so hard the glass pitcher cracked. His face turned a shade I didn't know skin could reach. My mother didn't speak at all, just sat there, lips pressed in a line sharp enough to draw blood, her eyes fixed on the table like if she looked at me, I'd become a stain she couldn't scrub out. I'm going to be a father, I said again, quieter. We're keeping the baby. That was when my father stood. Then you're no longer welcome in this house. Just like that. No argument. No slow boil. Just immediate exile. My mother didn't even blink. And that, more than my father's shouting, broke me. She didn't fight for me. Didn't ask him to reconsider. She just sat there, wearing silence like armor. I went to my room in a haze, grabbed my old duffel bag from the closet, stuffed it with a few pairs of jeans, 2 shirts, my sketchbook, and the hoodie Talia always said made me look half-decent. My fingers trembled as I zipped the bag shut. I could still hear my father pacing downstairs, could still feel the heat of his fury clinging to the walls. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But all I felt was a dull ache, like the shock after a bone's been broken. Before I left, I stepped into my little sister's room. Kayla was only 9. Her hair was in braids, her room full of glittery unicorns and colored pencils. She looked up from her bed, eyes wide. "Why are you leaving with your bag?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I knelt down, pressing my forehead to hers. "Because I have to, Kay," I said. "But I'll still be your big brother. No matter what." She nodded solemnly. Kids always understand more than we give them credit for. She didn't cry either. She just wrapped her arms around me so tight I thought my heart might collapse. And then I walked out. No goodbye from my parents. No second thoughts from them. It was like I'd vanished. One moment I was their son. The next, I was a stranger they never raised. Talia met me outside her apartment building. She'd been crying, mascara smudged around her eyes, wearing my old varsity jacket. She opened her arms the second I stepped toward her, and for the first time that day, I broke. My chin dropped to her shoulder, and I let myself feel the loss, the betrayal, the fear, the confusion. Her hands didn't shake anymore. They were steady on my back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No," I told her. "We didn't do anything wrong. We loved each other. And now we have to grow up faster than we wanted." She took me upstairs to her aunt's place, a 2-bedroom apartment where we'd share the smaller room, on a futon with a thin blanket and peeling paint on the ceiling. But that night, despite the ache in my chest and the storm in my head, I slept with her fingers laced in mine and hope tucked in between us. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the city and the weight of a future pressing down on me. I looked at Talia, still asleep, one hand on her stomach like her body already knew what was coming. That was the moment I knew there was no going back. Not to my old room. Not to family dinners or late-night TV with Kayla. I had crossed a line, and whatever was on the other side, I had to build it with my own hands. I went out that day and walked into every shop on that block until someone said yes. It was a small hardware store, smelled like sawdust and oil. The manager looked at me, saw the desperation in my eyes, and said, "We pay minimum wage, but it's a start." I nodded. It was more than I had yesterday. At night, I'd return to Talia's side, listen to her talk about school, rub her feet when they ached, and try not to let the weight of everything crush me. I started sketching again, not for dreams, but for sanity. In the margins of my notebooks, on the backs of receipts, even on brown paper bags. Art was my escape, my confession, my reminder that I still had something left of myself. I was 17. A runaway. A dropout. A soon-to-be father. But I was still here. Still standing. And I'd fight like hell to stay that way. We moved into the basement of Talia's aunt's duplex on the east side. The first thing I noticed was the smell, mildew, and mothballs with a hint of something burnt, like the air had held its breath too long. The ceiling tiles were stained yellow and sagged in places. The floor was concrete, cracked and cold even with the thrift store rug we dragged in. There were no windows, just a small vent near the ceiling that hissed like it was trying to breathe. But it was shelter. For walls and a door we could lock. And for 2 teenagers about to become parents, that was enough. The mattress on the floor squeaked with every movement. We hung a sheet to separate the sleeping area from the rest of the space, which barely fit a makeshift kitchen, a second-hand microwave, and a mini fridge donated by one of Talia's cousins. Every day we collected small victories. Figuring out how to keep the hot plate from shorting out the power, saving enough for a small fan, learning which corner didn't leak during rainstorms. It wasn't easy, but we called it home. I dropped out of school after the 2nd trimester. It wasn't some noble sacrifice, it was survival. Talia's belly was growing, and we couldn't both be in classrooms while bills gathered like dust. I picked up a day job sweeping aisles at a hardware store downtown, owned by a man named Cliff who didn't smile much but handed me my first paycheck with a gruff nod. At night, I hauled crates in the back of a warehouse 2 neighborhoods over. The hours were brutal. My body ached constantly, but I kept showing up. Sleep became optional. Food was whatever we could get for $5 or less. But I didn't complain. I couldn't afford to. Talia kept going to school, belly first through the halls, head down, headphones in. She was tougher than people gave her credit for. I watched her study by lamplight on nights I got home early. She'd fallen asleep more than once with a highlighter in her hand and a textbook as her pillow. When I tried to tuck her in, she'd stir and whisper, "Almost done," and go right back to reviewing chemistry notes. She refused to give up. And because of her, I refused too. I started taking free online courses during my lunch breaks and in stolen moments between shifts. Nothing official, just art history, color theory, digital design, anything to keep my brain awake. I'd sketch on receipt paper or in the margins of takeout menus. I didn't have canvases or real brushes, just dollar store supplies, but I made it work. Sometimes, I'd leave a small painting taped to the fridge for Talia to find. A baby elephant, a cityscape, her silhouette glowing under moonlight. Little love notes in watercolor and ink. It was the only way I knew to remind her that even in the dark, we were building something beautiful. Then came the night her water broke. I was halfway through a night shift, loading a pallet of cleaning supplies, when my phone buzzed like it was trying to shatter. Talia's aunt was on the line, panicked, shouting something about contractions and ambulances. I dropped everything. Didn't even clock out. Just ran. By the time I got to the hospital, they had her hooked up to machines, face flushed and knuckles white around the bed rails. She saw me and let out a breath like she'd been holding it for hours. I took her hand and kissed her forehead. "We got this," I said, though I felt like the walls were spinning. Micah came into the world at 3:17 a.m. screaming. Beautiful. Covered in everything I didn't understand but somehow loved instantly. The nurse placed him in my arms, and I forgot how tired I was, how hungry, how terrified. His eyes blinked up at me, my eyes, and I swear the whole room stilled. I cried. I didn't expect to, but it hit me like a tidal wave. Not just love. Redemption. Like the world hadn't swallowed me whole after all. Like I still had something worth becoming. We brought him home 2 days later in a borrowed car seat and a blanket someone had crocheted and left anonymously in the hospital gift bin. That first night, he cried nonstop. I paced the cold basement floor, humming lullabies I barely remembered from childhood, whispering promises I couldn't afford to break. I'm here. I'll always be here. Even when I'm tired. Even when the world forgets us. I won't. As the weeks passed, we learned everything the hard way. Diaper blowouts. Fevers. Long nights with no sleep and no answers. Talia cried sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd hold her in the middle of the night, both of us smelling like spit up and baby wipes, and tell her, we're doing it. One day at a time. And somehow, we were. I painted a mural on the wall behind Micah's crib. A sky filled with stars and a moon that glowed in the dark. I wanted him to know beauty, even if the floor beneath us was cracked. I wanted him to dream, even if we were barely surviving. That mural became my mission, a small rebellion against everything that told us we'd failed before we began. Every time I looked at Micah, I saw not just a baby, but a reason, a reset. He had Talia's focus, always studying the world like it owed him answers. But he smiled like me, wide, open, hopeful, and that made the exhaustion worth it. We didn't have much. Not then. Just 3 people in a basement. No diploma, no title, but we had each other. And that made our little world feel big enough. Even if no one else saw it, we did. There's a moment you never forget when you're a young father. It doesn't come during the sleepless nights or the first diaper disasters. It doesn't even come in the delivery room. For me, it came 3 years in, on a Tuesday afternoon, of all things. Micah had just spilled finger paint on the old futon. I was scrubbing red streaks off the side like a man possessed, muttering under my breath, when I looked up and saw him watching me. Not crying. Not laughing, just watching with this strange calm, like he was studying what men did when things went wrong. I remember freezing. My hand still held the rag, but I didn't move. Because in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just cleaning up a mess. I was teaching him how to handle life. That was the moment I stopped feeling like a kid with a kid and started realizing I was a father first, everything else second. By the time Micah turned 3, our basement apartment had become something of a second skin. Familiar. Worn. Still cold in the mornings, still damp when it rained, but it was ours. We had an old second-hand crib turned into a toddler bed, a toy bin that doubled as a coffee table, and more drawings on the wall than most museums. Talia had gone back to work part-time at a pharmacy, standing behind a counter in khakis and a name tag, while I worked early shifts at the hardware store and taught after-school art classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the community center nearby. I remember when I got the call from Mrs. Everly, the center coordinator. She had seen some of my paintings at a local pop-up and asked if I'd consider teaching kids. Nothing formal, she said. Just someone who knows color and won't scare off 3rd graders. I said yes before I even asked what it paid. It wasn't much, but it was more than money. It was a chance to build something I cared about. Micah came to most of the classes with me. He'd sit on a stool with his feet swinging and a brush in his hand, mimicking everything the older kids did. Sometimes I'd find him drawing little families, stick figures holding hands, with suns that always smiled and clouds that never cried. He didn't know how poetic that was. He just liked the colors. Talia and I barely had time for each other outside of the constant rotation of work, parenting, cleaning, and collapsing. Date nights were a luxury we couldn't afford, not just financially but mentally. Most nights we were too tired to speak more than a few words before sleep stole us away. But we didn't complain. We were tired together, worn together, surviving together. And that meant something. We did find moments. Small ones. She'd leave me little notes in Micah's lunch bag. Remember? Blue is his favorite now, or you've got this. I'd draw quick portraits of her while she slept, hair tangled, lips parted, peace in her posture. I never showed her most of them. They were for me, a reminder that beauty lived even in exhaustion. Our friends from high school had mostly vanished by then. We were too different now, too adult for their parties, too serious for their drama. Some would text occasionally, offer support, with a heavy helping of pity, like our lives had turned tragic. But I never saw it that way. Tragic was giving up. Tragic was walking away from responsibility. What we had, that was life. Real, raw, and completely ours. I started painting more, late at night when Micah was asleep and the world felt quiet enough for my mind to stretch out. I couldn't afford fancy materials, so I made do, mixing leftover paint from work, using cardboard when I ran out of canvas. Finding inspiration in the way sunlight hit the corner of the basement wall or the way Micah's hands looked covered in purple chalk. Each painting was a piece of my journey, a silent protest against the version of my life that people assumed I had, broken, wasted, aimless. I painted love. I painted strength. I painted hope that refused to die. One evening, I took Micah to the park. Talia was working a closing shift, and I needed to get him some air. He ran ahead of me in his little green hoodie, chasing pigeons and laughing like the world belonged to him. An older man on the bench beside me nodded as I sat down. "He yours?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "Didn't think you were old enough to have one that age." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "Being a father doesn't wait until you're ready. It just happens, and then you decide what kind of man you want to be." He studied me for a second, then nodded. "You're doing all right, kid." I didn't need his validation. But I won't lie, it felt good. Sometimes the world forgets to tell you when you're doing something right. It just points out when you screw up. So that one small comment? It stayed with me. We didn't have savings. We didn't have family support. But we had a rhythm now, a structure held together by sleepless nights and stubborn dreams. Every day I packed Micah's bag with snacks and wipes. Every day I kissed Talia goodbye on her way to work. And every night I tucked Micah in with a story and a song. One night, as I closed his bedroom door, I heard his small voice whisper, "I love you, Dad." I paused, not because it was the first time, but because he said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like he never questioned it. Like my love was his foundation, something he could count on like gravity. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the 17-year-old who got kicked out. I didn't feel like a statistic. I felt like a man. Not because I'd achieved anything monumental, but because I'd stayed. I'd tried. I'd loved. That's what fatherhood taught me. You don't grow up first and then become a dad. You become a dad, and it forces you to grow fast, hard, and deeply. And that version of me? He was just getting started. It was a Wednesday, one of those sluggish, gray afternoons where everything moved slower and even the air felt heavy. Micah was sitting cross-legged on the community center floor, drawing with his tongue peeking out of the corner of his mouth like it always did when he was focused. He had drawn a sunset. Bold orange smears with violet streaks above stick figures holding hands. I remember standing there, arms crossed, watching him and thinking, damn, the kid sees color better than most adults. I was about to pin it to the bulletin board when Mrs. Everly handed me a letter. "No return address," she said. "Just your name." I didn't recognize the envelope. The paper was thick, off-white, the kind that screamed formality. But the moment I saw the handwriting, my stomach turned. It was my father's. His signature slant, the sharp angles, the unyielding confidence in every curve. I hadn't seen that handwriting in years, but it hit me like a punch to the chest. My hands went numb. I took it to the empty office across the hall and shut the door. For a long time, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to tear it up without reading it. Let the past stay buried. But the curiosity was louder. So I opened it. Inside was a folded check and a note. Just one paragraph, written like a man who didn't know how to ask for anything without sounding like a lawyer. This is part of the fund we once saved for you. If you're willing, I'd like to see you. Not to justify, only to listen. That was it. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Gratitude? Rage? I'd lived the past 6 years pretending they didn't exist. That the world I had been cut off from wasn't mine to miss. But here it was again. His voice, somehow echoing off the page. A part of the fund we once saved for you. I looked at the check. $5,000. I could already see where that money would go. Micah's new shoes, Talia's student loans, real canvases instead of scraps, maybe fixing the heater that barely worked in the winter. But I wasn't ready to take it. Money without context feels like guilt trying to buy its way into your life. I folded the letter back up and tucked it into my sketch pad. Later that night, I didn't say anything to Talia right away. We were both tired. She had just finished a late shift at the pharmacy, and I was scrubbing paint off Micah's hands. He'd made a mess of the bathroom, trying to make blue from red and green. I smiled even as I cleaned it. The kid was trying to reinvent the wheel with all the defiance of someone who believed he could. That was me in miniature. When Micah was asleep, curled on his side with one fist tucked under his cheek, I sat on the edge of the bed and held the letter out to Talia. She read it in silence. Her face didn't twist, didn't flare with anger or sympathy. She just sighed. They waited this long, she finally said, handing it back. I nodded. Do you think he means it? She leaned her head against my shoulder. I think people remember what they had too late, and they try to get it back when it doesn't hurt them anymore. Do you think I should respond? She shrugged. That's up to you. But if you do it, don't do it for him. Do it for Micah. For you. She was right. She usually was when it came to matters of the heart. I spent the rest of the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what my father would even say to me. Would he pretend those years didn't happen? Would he expect me to hug him like nothing shattered? I didn't need an apology. I needed the truth. I needed to know if he sent that letter because he'd changed or because he was ashamed of the silence he created. The next day, I found myself staring at the mirror above the sink. My reflection looked older than 23. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was being a dad before being a man. My beard was patchy, my eyes heavier. But there was something else too, something I didn't have at 17. Steadiness. I sat down with Micah over cereal and asked him, "Do you know what a grandfather is?" He looked up with milk on his chin. Like Gramps in my book? Kind of. My dad. He wants to meet us. Micah frowned, thinking hard. Is he nice? I hesitated. He used to be. Then he wasn't. But he might want to try again. Micah shrugged. If he's not mean to you, maybe. That was all it took. Permission from the one person who mattered most. I didn't call. I wrote back. My letter was shorter than his. I got your message. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be, but I'm willing to talk, if you're willing to listen, like you said. This isn't about me anymore. It's about Micah. I mailed it with shaking hands. The wait that followed was agonizing. Every day I checked the mailbox twice. Talia didn't ask for updates, but I saw her glance at the door every time the postman came by. Even Micah asked once, "Did your dad write back yet?" Like it was a pen pal project from school. A week passed, then 10 days. Finally, a small envelope arrived. Different handwriting. My mother's. Inside was a photo. It was me at age 10, painting at the kitchen table, smiling. On the back, she had written, "I never threw it away." He kept it in his drawer. No words. Just the image. I stared at that photo for a long time. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt, remembered, not forgiven, not reconciled, but acknowledged. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first brushstroke towards something new. It was past 9 when Talia's phone buzzed. We had just finished dinner, cheap Chinese takeout that Micah insisted on because he loved the little fortune cookies. He was on the floor, constructing a spaceship from chopstick wrappers and soy sauce packets, narrating with sound effects only a child could invent. Talia glanced at the screen, her lips tightening around the edge of her cup. I watched the color shift in her face. "It's Lucas," she said, handing me the phone. Lucas. My younger brother. The one who never called. Not when Micah was born. Not when he saw the news about my community art exhibit 2 years ago. Not even when we lost our apartment and moved twice in 6 months. I took the phone anyway, my fingers already tense around it. "Jordan." His voice was cautious, too careful. "Yeah. One word." Flat. I'm getting married. Next month. I want you there. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. You want me at your wedding? After 6 years of silence. I know how it sounds, Lucas said quickly. But things are different now. Dad's not. He's not doing great. What's wrong with him? Silence. Then, I'll let him tell you, if you come. That stung. Not just the vagueness, but the implication, like I had to earn the truth. Like I had to step back into their world just to be trusted with something basic. And Micah? I asked. There was a pause. Of course. We want to meet him too. We. Not I. Not me and Brielle, his fiancée. We, meaning my parents. The people who shut the door in my face and let it stay shut long enough for Micah to learn to walk and talk and ride a bike without them ever once seeing it. And now they wanted to meet him? Like he was an exhibit they hadn't toured yet? I didn't say anything. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Lucas rushed in with more words. Look, I know this doesn't make up for anything, but they've changed. We all have. I think you'd be surprised. That was the part that really got under my skin. Not the invite, not even the talk of change, but the assumption that I hadn't. That they'd been evolving in my absence while I remained suspended in that moment when I was 17 and told to pack my things. I hung up without promising anything. Talia and I didn't talk for a few minutes. Micah was still playing, humming some off-key tune while his plastic spaceship crashed into invisible planets. She finally broke the silence. You okay? I nodded, then shook my head. I don't know. What did he say? They want us at the wedding. They want to meet Micah. She sat with that a while, letting the weight of it settle into the room. Are you thinking about it? I don't know. I said again, rubbing my thumb over my knee like the friction would clarify something. Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. The other part wonders what it would mean for Micah, for him to know where he comes from, even if it's messy. Talia leaned over, resting her head against my shoulder. Whatever you decide, we go together. I looked at her then, really looked. This woman who'd never asked me to be more than I was, never held my past against me, never made me feel like I had to beg for a place at her table. She didn't like my parents. Never had. Not since that first awful night. But she wasn't letting that speak louder than my uncertainty. She was letting me choose. That's what real love looks like. Not the kind you shout from rooftops, but the kind that stays silent and sturdy beside you when decisions threaten to break your spine. That night, after we tucked Micah in, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope with the wedding details Lucas had sent. Ivory cardstock. Gilded borders. Everything curated to perfection. Lucas and Brielle invite you to share in their joy. Even the names looked smug, printed in gold. I imagined my family in tuxedos and designer dresses, toasting champagne, clapping politely, pretending like nothing ever broke. Micah shuffled out of bed, rubbing his eyes. Daddy, I'm thirsty. I got him a cup of water, watched him drink it slowly, lips puckering around the rim. When he finished, he asked, Why do you look mad? I crouched beside him. Do you remember how I told you some of our family lives far away? Yeah, they want to meet you. He blinked. Like, your mommy and daddy? I nodded. Okay. He didn't seem scared or excited. Just open. Children don't carry the same bitterness. They just want to understand. Would you want that? I asked. Will they like me? That question shattered something in me. He wasn't worried about judgment or history. He was worried about belonging. I hugged him tight. They'd be lucky to meet you. When I looked at Talia later, I already knew what I had to do. I'm going, I said. Not for them. Not to forgive or pretend, but because Micah deserves to know what came before him, even if it was broken. She nodded once. Then we go as a family. I kissed her forehead. Always. And just like that, something inside me shifted. I wasn't walking toward them as a boy with his head bowed. I was walking in as a father, a partner, a man who had built a life from ashes. They weren't getting a prodigal son. They were getting someone far more whole. Someone they never expected. The wedding was held at a private estate on the edge of town, one of those places with ivory columns, a cobblestone driveway, and a staff that opened your car door before you even unbuckled. We pulled into the parking lot in Talia's aunt's borrowed Toyota, the windshield chipped and the AC barely working. I parked away from the luxury cars Autis, Benz S, even a Dam Rolls, like we didn't belong in the same row. Micah sat in the back, swinging his legs nervously in his little gray suit. Talia had spent the morning fixing his collar and smoothing his curls while humming under her breath. He looked perfect. We all did, in our own way. Talia wore a navy blue dress that made her eyes stand out like sapphire glass, and I had on the only blazer that still fit from my senior year. We didn't look like guests. We looked like a family that had fought to be here, and that was the truth. We walked through the arched gates, down a flagstone path that cut through manicured lawns. String lights dangled from tree branches, swaying in the late spring breeze. Laughter floated from the tent ahead, a sound I used to associate with safety. I kept walking, even as my chest tightened with every step. Inside the reception area, a string quartet played something delicate. White chairs lined in gold ribbon circled a dance floor that sparkled beneath a glass ceiling. Everything looked like a bridal magazine had come to life. Then, the glances started. My mother saw us first. She froze in place, her wine glass halfway to her lips. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes didn't find me first, they locked on Micah. And her expression cracked. Not from anger, not even regret. From disbelief. My father stood near the groom's table. He turned slowly, his hand still mid-gesture as he spoke to a man in a tailored gray suit. Then he saw us. His jaw tightened. His shoulders lifted slightly, like he was bracing for something. He didn't come forward. Neither of them did. We made it halfway through the room before someone finally approached. Lucas. He looked good, clean-cut, tan, the picture of someone whose life followed a clean line. He smiled when he saw us, but there was hesitation in it. A kind of guarded warmth. "Jordan," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm really glad you came." "Yeah," I said flatly. "Me too." He crouched slightly and smiled at Micah. "And you must be Micah." Micah looked up at him, then at me, then nodded slowly. "Hi." Lucas's smile widened. "You look just like your dad." "He gets that a lot," I said, not breaking eye contact. Lucas stood and cleared his throat. "There." "Over there," he said, nodding subtly toward our parents. I nodded once. "Thanks." We didn't walk toward them right away. We found a spot near the back of the room, by the bar. I held Micah's hand as he looked around in awe at the chandelier above us. "Is this a castle?" he whispered. "Something like that," I said. Then, finally, they came. My father arrived first. He walked slowly, with the same stiff dignity I remembered from my childhood, shoulders square, back straight, chin held high. But something was different. He looked older than I remembered. Not just age diminished. He stopped in front of us. His eyes met mine for only a second before sliding to the boy standing beside me. What is this?" he asked, his voice low but rattled. "Is this?" Micah stepped forward, small but brave, like he was stepping into a room he'd already dreamed about. "Hi," he said. "I'm Micah Reyes. Are you my grandma?" My mother had come up silently behind my father. Her hand trembled slightly as she took her wine glass from her lips and set it down. Her eyes were red already. She didn't speak. She just looked at Micah like he was both a memory and a miracle. My father swallowed hard. "Micah," he repeated slowly, like the name was something sacred and foreign. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Micah had already spoken the loudest truth in the room. He didn't ask for an apology. He didn't accuse anyone. He just existed, perfectly, without shame. And somehow, that did more damage than any angry words I could have thrown at them. My mother crouched down next to him, slowly, as if any sudden movement would make him vanish. "Amanda," she said. Can I hug you?" Micah looked at me. I gave him a small nod. He wrapped his arms around her neck, his little fingers squeezing gently. She didn't let go right away. My father stood still, watching, processing. Then he turned to me. "You did good," he said. For words. Quiet. But from him, it might as well have been a confession. I met his gaze, steady now. "He's the best thing I ever made." He nodded once. "I'd like to know him." "That depends," I said, "on whether you're willing to meet me too." His face didn't change much, but I saw it in the small twitch of his lip, the way his eyes blinked faster. He knew what I meant. Micah let go of my mother and walked back to me, grabbing my hand. "Can I go look at the cake table?" "Sure, kiddo. Just don't touch anything yet." He ran off, light on his feet. Talia took my other hand. She hadn't spoken since we entered the room, but I could feel everything she was thinking in the way she squeezed my palm. "Whatever happens next," I said, looking at my father, "just know this, he doesn't owe any of you forgiveness." "Neither do I." "I understand," he said. And for once, I believed him. We watched Micah circle the cake, grinning. And just like that, the room didn't feel so foreign anymore. Because the center of it all wasn't chandeliers or speeches or champagne. It was that little boy in a gray suit, reminding everyone what mattered: family, truth, presence, and the courage it takes to show up, no matter how long it takes. The thing about walking into a room where you were once erased is that every step feels like a statement. The wedding reception had shifted into dinner and drinks, small groups forming around white-clothed tables and low chatter filling the air. We stayed near the back, Talia, Micah, and I, avoiding the head table and the glossy smiles that felt too rehearsed. I wasn't interested in small talk. I was still digesting the way my father had looked at Micah, like he didn't know whether to cry or apologize. He hadn't done either. That's when I saw him, Gerard Lyon. He stood near one of the canvas-covered partition walls with Lucas's fiancée, Bree. He was older now, silver streaks in his beard, glasses resting low on the bridge of his nose. I remembered him from an art showcase in high school, back when people still talked about me like I had potential. He was a curator for a local gallery, always sniffing out the next great thing. He'd shaken my hand once when I was 16 and told me, "You've got an edge to you. Don't let it dull." Now, he stared at Micah, who was seated at a side table drawing a house with crayon on a kid's activity sheet. I watched as Gerard tilted his head, then bent down to get a better look. Micah, ever the open soul, started explaining his drawing, how the roof was red because red made it look safe, and the tree was crooked because real trees didn't grow perfectly straight. I walked over slowly, unsure if this was going to be awkward or affirming. Gerard stood upright as I approached, eyes flicking to mine. "This your son?" "Yeah, that's Micah. He's got a rare sense of composition for his age," Gerard said, arms crossed as he nodded thoughtfully. "Who taught him that?" I shrugged. "No one really. He watches me. I guess it rubbed off." "You paint?" "Still do." His eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Wait. Jordan Reyes." I gave a single nod. He blinked, recognition lighting up his expression. "You disappeared. I remember your work. That piece you did at the Whitestone Academy Youth Show City in Mourning, that canvas stayed with me for months. That was a long time ago." "Still," he said, "talent like that doesn't just vanish." I glanced back at Micah, who was now shading in the sun with a bright yellow crayon. "It doesn't. It just finds different walls to hang on." Gerard was silent for a beat, then stepped closer. "You got anything recent?" "A few pieces," I said cautiously. "I teach now, after-school art classes at the rec center. And I paint when I can. Nights, weekends." His eyebrows lifted. "I'd like to see your work. And your son's. There's something raw about both of you. It's honest. And I don't see honest often enough." I didn't know how to respond to that. Compliments weren't something I trusted easily, especially not from people who once knew me at my most promising. But this didn't feel performative. It felt interested. Real. "You serious?" I asked. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't. Talia had joined us by then. She didn't interrupt, just stood quietly, one hand on Micah's shoulder. Gerard turned to her. "Your family's got something special here. Don't let the world dull it out of you." And just like that, he handed me his card and walked away. I tucked it into my pocket, trying to keep my expression even. Talia nudged me. "You okay?" "I think so." "You're more than okay," she said, voice quiet. "You're being seen again." I exhaled slowly. I forgot what that felt like. But it didn't stop there. Word must have spread. First, one guest wandered over, asking if it was true I was Jordan Reyes, the same kid who had sketches published in the Whitestone zine. Then another, someone who remembered my early portfolio online. They weren't malicious, just curious. Whispered fragments reached my ears. Thought he dropped out, heard his dad disowned him. That's his son? I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I just let it come. Then my father approached again. He didn't look angry, just unsettled. Maybe by how quickly people were gravitating back to me. Maybe by how natural Micah looked in that room. "We should talk," he said softly. "Only if you're ready to listen," I replied, echoing the words he had once sent to me. He nodded, gesturing toward a quiet corridor near the exit. Talia gave me a look. "Go," she said. "I've got Micah." I followed him down the hall. The noise of the reception faded behind us. We stopped near a stained glass window overlooking a garden. "I didn't come here for a fight," he said. "Good, because I'm not interested in one." He looked down, then back at me. "I sent that letter because I've been wrong for a long time. And watching Micah today, he's everything I thought you couldn't be when you were 17. Turns out, I was just too proud to see who you were becoming." I crossed my arms. "You said I disgraced the family." "I did," he said quickly. "And I was wrong. I was scared. Embarrassed. And I took that fear out on you. I let pride build a wall I didn't know how to climb down from. I let the silence stretch. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. It wasn't just about you and me. You disappeared. From Micah. From Talia. You erased us like we didn't count. I know, he said. And I don't expect to be forgiven. But I'm here now. I want to be part of your life again. I want to know my grandson. I studied him. Really studied him. And for the first time, I didn't see the man who kicked me out. I saw a man still holding the pieces of what he broke. Then show up, I said. Not for one day. Not for the wedding. Show up when it's hard. When it's boring. When no one's watching. That's what being a father is. That's what Micah needs. He nodded. Then I will. I didn't smile. I didn't shake his hand. But I didn't walk away. And maybe that was enough. Not an ending. But a confrontation that didn't end in fire for once. Just an open door. And a chance. Every Saturday morning started the same, with the smell of burnt coffee and the gentle hum of sunlight through the blinds. Micah would wake up first, climbing into our bed and wedging himself between me and Talia like a live wire full of questions. Are we going to the studio today, Dad? He'd ask, already dressed in mismatched socks and a superhero t-shirt. He knew the answer, but he asked anyway. Saturdays were sacred. They belonged to paint-streaked aprons, drying canvases, and the small circle of kids who gathered in the rec center's east wing, calling me Mr. J, while Micah proudly announced, "That's my dad." After the wedding, something shifted, slowly, like an old house creaking back into place after a storm. My father started coming to the studio. Not every weekend, not with some grand announcement or apology. He'd just show up, quietly, take a seat near the back of the room, and help when asked. At first, the kids avoided him. He looked out of place in his pressed slacks and button-down shirts, a man too stiff for smocks and finger paint. But he adapted. He rolled up his sleeves, filled water cups, helped tie aprons. When a paint tray spilled, he was the first to grab a rag. I watched him out of the corner of my eye for weeks, waiting for the mask to slip, for the judgment to surface again. But it never did. He didn't speak much. Just observed, listened, and slowly blended into the rhythm we'd built without him. Micah took to him faster than I expected. One afternoon, he walked right up to my father with a wet paintbrush and said, "Can you hold this while I mix purple?" My father took it like it was something sacred. From that day on, Micah called him Gramps. No one told him to. No one prompted him. It just happened. Natural. Like kids can see the parts of people that still want to be good. My mother came too, eventually. The first time, she brought store-bought cookies in a Tupperware container and hovered near the entrance like she was afraid to break something. She barely made eye contact with me, but she sat with Talia, asked her questions, real ones, not forced, and complimented Micah's drawings like they were masterpieces. It wasn't warm, exactly, but it was effort. And for people like her, effort was monumental. Talia remained cautious. She had every right to be. She'd seen me cry after the door was slammed in my face. She'd wiped away tears I didn't even know I'd shed in the first year we struggled alone. She didn't forgive easily, but she observed, measured, and what she saw, over time, was consistency. No promises. No grand gestures. Just two people, my parents, who kept showing up. One Saturday, I gave the kids a lesson on texture. We glued fabric and thread to the canvases, creating layers before we even touched paint. Micah's piece looked like a jungle, green yarn vines, cotton clouds, gold foil for the sun. My father stood behind him, gently trimming a piece of felt with scissors while Micah described his rainforest planet. I stepped back for a moment, took it all in, the kids laughing, paint splattered everywhere, the smell of acrylics in the air, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. After class, when the last of the kids had run off with their rolled-up projects, my father stayed behind. He wiped the tables without being asked, like it was routine now. I walked over with 2 paper cups of coffee, cheap, slightly bitter, but hot. He took his with a nod. "You're good at this," he said. "Teaching." "All of it," he said, motioning to the room. "You built this from scratch." I didn't respond right away. I just sipped my coffee, watching Micah in the corner cleaning brushes, humming to himself. "I didn't know how to support you when you were 17, my father said after a moment. "I didn't even try." "No," I said softly. "You didn't. I thought I was protecting you. From failure. From ruining your life. And what you actually did," I said, turning to face him, "was make me build one without you." He looked away then, that old pride still flickering under the surface. But he didn't defend himself. He just nodded. You did build one. Better than I ever could have imagined. We stood there in silence. Not heavy silence. Just stillness. A kind of understanding. Micah skipped over a moment later, holding a dripping brush. We need more blue, Dad. I reached for the tub. Dark or sky? Sky, he said. It's for the clouds. He darted back, and I handed the container off to him like a baton in a race. My father watched, his eyes softening. I missed so much, he said under his breath. Yeah, I said. But you're here now. That counts for something. He gave a small smile. Not wide. Not proud. Just real. Talia came in with 2 juice boxes and sat on the stool beside me, nodding at my father. He helped Micah glue on leaves, she said, almost teasing. I'm a quick learner, he replied, and for once, she didn't bristle. Micah stood up on his stool and held his canvas above his head like a trophy. Tada. It wasn't perfect. The glue was smeared. The clouds were uneven. But the joy on his face made it museum-worthy. My mother walked in just then, holding a camera. She'd apparently picked up a hobby lately, photography. She asked if she could take a picture. Micah posed. Talia smiled. I stood beside them, my arm around my son, my other hand resting on Talia's shoulder. My parents stood to the side, capturing it. Not in control. Not defining it. Just witnessing. And that felt right. Because after all these years, we were still painting our family. Layer by layer. Stroke by stroke. And for the first time, everyone was holding a brush. The email came on a rainy Thursday night, the kind where the sky felt too low and the water hit the windows like it was trying to get inside. Micah was asleep on the couch under a pile of blankets, one sock halfway off and his latest masterpiece clutched in his fist, a spaceship made entirely out of bottle caps and dried pasta. Talia was in the kitchen, flipping through coupons and humming a lullaby she'd never admit she still sang to herself. I was at the rickety desk we'd shoved against the wall, laptop open, cursor blinking on an unfinished lesson plan for the Saturday class. Then the inbox pinged. Subject, proposal for exhibition, generations in color. I clicked, half expecting spam or another rejection. Instead, I read the words 3 times before I could believe they were real. Jordan, it was an honor meeting you and Micah at the line reception. I meant what I said about your work. It's raw, emotional, and utterly human. I'm curating a new exhibit this fall focused on the theme of generational creativity, and I'd like to formally invite you and Micah to be featured artists. Title, Generations in Color. Your story. The 2 of you creating despite the odds is the heart of what this gallery needs. Let me know if you're open to it. Best, Gerard Lyon. I blinked. Read it again. Then I stood up slowly and walked into the kitchen. Talia glanced up. What's that face? Gerard wants to feature us, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Me and Micah. In a gallery exhibit. She dropped her pen. What? I handed her the laptop. She read the message in silence, her hand covering her mouth. Then she let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. Oh my God. I nodded. He wants our work. Together. Talia looked at me, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. You're going to be on a wall again. We are, I said. This time, not alone. We told Micah the next morning. He blinked at us over a bowl of cereal, spoon halfway to his mouth. Like, real people will see my pictures? In a museum? Gallery, I corrected, though to him it might as well have been the Louvre. He dropped his spoon and raised both arms in the air. I'm going to be famous. Talia laughed, tousling his curls. You already are to us. The next few weeks moved in a blur, selecting the pieces, stretching new canvases, painting late into the night while Micah hummed beside me and added finishing touches to his crayon rainstorms and rocket landscapes. Talia helped frame our work, label the backs, and type up the artist bios that Gerard requested. Mine was easy, 24, painter, teacher, father. Micah's? Age 6. Like cinnamon toast. Paints what he dreams. The opening night arrived on a Saturday, fittingly. The gallery was in the heart of the city, all exposed brick and pendant lights, walls hung with textured emotion and stories frozen in color. The exhibit title greeted us in bold lettering near the entrance, Generations in Color, featuring Jordan and Micah Reyes. Our names, side by side. Talia looked stunning in a burgundy wrap dress. Micah wore a bow tie and suspenders, insisting he looked like a serious artist. I held both their hands as we walked into the gallery. Guests moved slowly through the room, pausing to take in the art. My section held oil portraits of fatherhood, of Micah sleeping, of our basement ceiling with its peeling hope. Micah's pieces were opposite mine, bright explosions of color and imagination, joy without restraint. The contrast was startling and perfect. Pain and light, depth and freedom. Side by side, like two chapters of the same story. People stopped us, asked questions, shook our hands. Some asked about our process. Others just stood quietly, reading the descriptions beside the paintings. Then, I saw him. My father stood in front of one of my canvases, his hand lightly resting against the wall just below the frame. It was a painting of our old kitchen table, empty, scarred, lit only by a shaft of memory-shaped light. I hadn't given it a title. "I remember this table," he said when he noticed me behind him. "You used to draw with crayons on the corner." I nodded. "You painted over them." He turned, meeting my eyes. I wish I hadn't. It wasn't an apology, but it was a confession. And sometimes, that's what healing sounds like. "I don't remember drawing on it," I said softly. "But I remember you buying it. I remember you sanding it down in the garage." He smiled faintly. "I did. Thought I was building something solid for the family." "You were," I said. "It just didn't hold the way you hoped." He placed a hand on my shoulder. Not heavy, not performative, just steady. This gallery. It's beautiful, Jordan. You didn't just rebuild. You made something new." Before I could respond, Micah tugged my sleeve. "Come see mine, Dad," he said, bouncing. "This one's called Sky Hugs." He dragged me across the room to a crayon-heavy canvas filled with blue swirls and two stick figures floating in the sky, arms stretched toward each other. "That's you," he said, pointing. "And that's me. We're hugging but flying too." Talia joined us, her eyes glassy as she read the little description he'd dictated. "My dad always catches me, even when I fly too high." I pulled them both into a hug right there, not caring who was watching. Because this wasn't just art. This was our life. On the walls. In the room. Alive and seen. Later that night, Gerard gave a short speech. "There's something rare about seeing stories told through color and contrast," he said. "Jordan and Micah Reyes remind us that family isn't always neat, but it is always powerful when it stays." The crowd clapped. My parents clapped. Talia squeezed my hand. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the boy who was cast out. I felt like a man who had carved a world for his son, one stroke at a time. And finally, we were framed not in shame, but in celebration. The crowd had thinned out by the time I saw him, tall, smug, polished. Like a shadow stepping back into a story that no longer belonged to him. Ronan Blake, Talia's ex. The one who ghosted her the moment life asked him to grow up. He stood near the back of the gallery, wearing a navy suit and a practiced smile, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment to step onto the stage. I hadn't seen him since we were 17, since that whispered rumor passed through the halls of our high school that he wasn't ready to be a father. He didn't call, didn't check in, didn't offer a dime. And now, here he was, staring at Micah's artwork like it meant something to him. He looked up and noticed me. His face tightened for half a second before it softened into something friendlier, fake, but rehearsed. "Jordan," he said, as if we were old friends at a reunion instead of two men who stood on opposite sides of everything that mattered. "Ronan," I replied, flat. He took a few steps forward. "He's amazing. Micah, I mean, the pieces. His eye for color. He's really talented." I nodded once. "He is." A pause stretched between us. "I saw the article about the exhibit," he added. "My mom forwarded it. Said the name sounded familiar. When I saw the pictures. You decided to come claim something," I interrupted, voice sharp but calm. He flinched. "I'm not here to start trouble." "No," I said. "You're just here to show up for the first time in 7 years. In a suit. In a gallery. Where there are people to impress. That's not fair." "You're right," I said. "Fair would have been you standing next to Talia in a delivery room. Fair would have been you handing her tissues instead of silence when she told you she was pregnant." He inhaled, looked away. I was scared. "So was I snapped. But I didn't run. I didn't vanish." He pressed his lips together, nodding slowly. "Look, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to see him. See who he is. What he became." I folded my arms. "He became what you couldn't." That one hit. He swallowed hard and nodded. "Do you think I could meet him? Just once?" The protective instinct in me flared up like a fire set to dry brush. But I didn't shout. I didn't curse. Instead, I looked over at Micah, who was laughing with Talia and my mom near the refreshment table. He had a juice box in one hand and a cookie in the other. Carefree. Whole. I'll ask, I said. But if he says no, it's no. And if he says yes, it's one time. You disappear after. Understood. I walked over to Micah and crouched next to him. Hey, buddy. There's someone here who wants to meet you. He looked up, his brows furrowed. Who? I hesitated. His name is Ronan. He used to know your mom. From before you were born. Micah considered that for a second. Is he nice? He says he just wants to meet you. You don't have to go with him. You don't have to talk. You can just wave and go back to your cookie. Micah looked across the room and saw Ronan standing stiffly by the door. Then he looked back at me. Okay, he said. Just a wave. I took his hand and walked him over. Ronan's eyes filled the closer we got, a look somewhere between awe and guilt. Hey there, he said gently. Micah stood behind my leg, just peeking out. Ronan crouched to his level. Your name's Micah, right? Micah nodded slowly. Yep. I saw your art, Ronan said. It's really good. You're very talented. Thanks, Micah mumbled. There was a pause. Then Micah stepped forward and offered a handshake. Ronan took it, his hand visibly shaking. Okay, Micah said. That's it. I smiled. That's it. Micah turned and went back to Talia, who was watching with steady eyes. I stayed a moment longer. He's polite, Ronan said, standing. He's more than polite. He's kind. He's smart. He's stubborn. And he's loved. I can see that, he said. He doesn't need me. No, I said. He doesn't. Ronan nodded once. Well, thank you for letting me say hello. I didn't offer a goodbye. Just watched him leave. He didn't ask for another visit. He didn't plead or cause a scene. Maybe he saw, finally, the full weight of what he walked away from. Or maybe he just realized it was too late to start rewriting chapters that had already been beautifully written without him. Back near the art wall, Talia placed her hand on my back. Are you okay? I am now. Micah, she asked. He's fine. Said his piece. She looked toward our son. He knows who his father is. I nodded, pulling her in closer. Yeah, and I know who I am. The night ended with a slow walk through the gallery, just the three of us. Micah skipped ahead, stopping at each painting to explain it like he was a tour guide. Talia laughed quietly, her hand in mine. And me, I took it all in. The walls, the colors, the weight we'd carried and laid down piece by piece. This wasn't just the end of an exhibit. It was the beginning of everything else. We didn't need anyone's approval. We didn't need apologies wrapped in guilt. We had each other. We had a life built from ruin and turned into light. And as we stepped into the night air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just peace, but power. We weren't the family people expected. We were better.